everybody's got all the things they need to get. All right. This meeting is being held in compliance with the Open Public Meeting Act, Chapter 231, Public Law 1975. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided in the following manner. The annual notice was forwarded to the Asbury Park Press and posted on the municipal bulletin board. All notices are on file with the planning board secretary. Fire exits are located on the east and west sides of the council chambers, as well as the rear of the building. I would ask anyone with a cell phone or other device to kindly put it on silent mode for the duration of this meeting. This meeting, just as a reminder, this meeting is being recorded by APTV. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
March 25th, 2019, 7 p.m. Councilwoman Yvonne Clayton.
Here.
Mayor John Moore.
Here.
Jim Henry. Here. Michael Manzella.
Here.
Trudy Seifert.
Here.
Jennifer Sauer.
Here.
Alexis Taylor.
Here.
Rick Lambert.
Here.
Barbara Krizak.
Here. I'll review the agenda. At this point, we have two applications: 910 4th Avenue and R-Bar for 1112 to 1114 Main Street. There aren't any changes at this point to the agenda, so let's proceed. We have the minutes.
Yes.
Can I ask for a motion for the minutes for March 11th?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Mark me down as a statement, please.
Okay. 910 4th Avenue.
We need to have actually Jim up here because he's going to be one of the voting members of this application.
Has anyone listened to the tape or read the transcript from October 22nd for this application?
Who would be?
Okay, the eligible members that attended at that meeting and heard this application were Michael Manzella, Yvonne Clayton, Barbara Krizak, John Moore, and Jim Henry.
Oh. Do we have enough?
We still have 5. We have a
That's what I'm
quorum.
saying, so whoever.
Okay.
But I can,
We just need somebody to switch it.
Okay.
Yeah, so the rest of you can participate in the discussion, but are not eligible to vote.
Okay. And once again, who's that going to be?
Michael Manzella,
Okay.
Yvonne Clayton,
Yeah.
you, Mayor Moore, and Jim Henry.
Okay. That's what happens when there's a carryover like that. Over an end of a year. Okay. All right, let's get going.
I just want to explain to my client. Thanks.
Sure.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Again, for the record, Thomas J. Hirsch representing the applicant. It's actually GECCFLP, a lot of initials. So I understand we only have 5 voting members tonight on this application, correct?
Mm-hmm.
All right. I'd like to go forward with the application, but I'd like to reserve our request for a vote at the end of the meeting, whether we can carry it till we have 7 members, or hopefully maybe at another meeting, or we may ask for the vote tonight. I just like to reserve that, but this way the record will be made. We're not wasting the board's time. It's been a long time since we've been here.
If you do that, the new members that listen to the transcript may have questions from the prior meeting. So you're back a second time. You want?
Yeah.
I understand what you want to do. You want to present it, the full board can hear it, and you may want to ask for the vote to be taken at a later date. If so, then the rest of the members would have to certify.
They read a
They read the transcript.
Exactly.
But your witnesses would have to be available for both the first and second meeting to answer the questions.
I agree. We'll just see where it goes with it, but
Yes, I have a
We're here.
question. I have a question. It makes all sense whatsoever, but then why would I ask any questions tonight if we're gonna have another hearing? Why would I tip my hand where I'm going?
That's entirely up to you.
Okay, so I won't ask any questions, and I'll reserve your right to have another meeting with the full board.
Well,
Because you're
I'm
gonna
hoping
wait
to have a fair dialogue with the
Right,
board.
but
so
I
we
understand
can-
what you're saying, but you're gonna wait till the end of the meeting to see what the flavor is, and then you're gonna decide, yes, I wanna vote, or no, I wanna vote.
Well, that's because we only have 5 members. That wasn't our doing.
Well, we all knew that in October, so nothing's changed since October.
I'm sorry. I'm not following.
When we met in October, if it was October,
It was.
that
October
was,
22nd.
the minutes reflect, there was only 5 board members here. So nothing's changed.
I don't recall there was only 5 board members here.
Yes, there were 5.
I thought there was only 5 here that are current present from that meeting,
Well, there were only 5 board members who heard the application.
that night.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've got the list right in front of me.
Yeah,
So there was no one else here other than those 5.
all right. Yeah, we try to not waste the board's time and our time by asking for adjournments. I mean, we do this fairly often. We're trying to get a fair give and take from the board, and I would think it makes sense to ask questions now so we understand concerns you have. If you don't want to ask questions, I can't make you ask questions. In any event, so we'll move forward and we'll see where we end up. So by way of review, it's been some time obviously since we were here. We presented, and again, but for basic review, you'll recall that the current building is tenanted by the Asbury Park Board of Education. They've been there for almost 5 years. They have, as Mr. Hastings testified on behalf of the board at the last meeting, there's a lease with 2 5-year options, and Mr. Hastings indicated the board's desire to stay here, but we certainly have him here tonight. He can come back and review some of that information with you. The existing building is not being changed in terms of a footprint or enlarged in any way. In that sense, we're taking an existing area that was designed, not designed, but was converted, a better word, many years ago when this current owner purchased the building, when it was changed from I think it was a Friedman's bakery. I don't mean retail, I mean where they actually baked all the goods for Friedman's. They converted it to office space, and at that time there was this area that had a big garage door, and it was essentially used for deliveries and storage and related issues to the bakery manufacturing. So when the client converted it to office space, there was, I guess, a dialogue. I was not involved back in those days, but it was a dialogue about putting some parking spaces in that storage area. So that's the area that is the subject matter of the application that the Board of Ed is seeking, would like the landlord, the owner, to seek approval to convert that into a conference room or a meeting room area, as we explained at the first hearing. The site has 15 parking spaces outside, and the issue, of course, is the parking variance that we require. We went through some architectural plans and so on and so forth the last time, and there was some dialogue back and forth with the board about parking issues. The board was kind enough to make some recommendations about how to approach the evidentiary side of establishing a parking analysis, such as reviewing the parking, the street parking in the area, when it was available, when it wasn't, in relationship to the use of this building, which is a daytime use, and these conferences that the district, the Board of Ed, has to hold are limited to, and we'll go over this again a couple of times a month, I think it was, where additional, other than the employees in the building, come from other schools, and that's why they need the enlarged conference room. So we our architect, Mr. O'Neill, prepared a study which has been submitted to the board where he did an analysis of existing on-site parking, off-site parking, street parking, its availability during various times of the day, the number of spaces available within certain distances, which he broke down in his report, and of course, is going to testify to tonight.
Did you say he's an architect or a traffic engineer?
No, he's an architect and a planner. There's no traffic counts or anything like that. It's an analysis of visual analysis that they did a study, took notes, to what was available, when it was available. It's not a traffic expert opinion. It's just facts as to what's there and what isn't, and when it's there and when it's not there. So anyway, we went through that. He talked about other available, what if any other available parking there is. I also asked him, because there was one mention made in the planner's report concerning your master plan about concerns about any impact on residential areas. So he's going to present some testimony on his analysis of the parking demands from the residential properties in the general area. So that was some of the give and take we had at the last meeting to come back with that kind of information. And that's what we're prepared to do tonight. So I'd like to initially call back to the stand Edward O'Neill, who was previously qualified as an architect and planner. And you want him sworn again?
Yeah, one caveat though, just to make sure we understand how it will work. Pardon me. If you conclude your case, if you say I'm done, okay, the board can vote.
I understand.
So that's, be guided as.
I understand.
Okay, all right.
Thank you. Mr. O'Neill.
Now let's get him resworn just to make sure.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you give during these proceedings will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
State your name for the record.
Edward W. O'Neill, Jr.
Thank you.
I think the last time you qualified as an architect, you mentioned that you were a planner. Did you put your planning qualifications on the record as well?
I thought I did.
Would you like him?
No, as long as you're making that representation there on the record, we're good.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I, before we start, can I give these out?
Sure.
These are additions to the parking report that Mr. Hirsch brought out. To be honest with you, even at that scale, they really won't be able to be seen. So I thought if I got copies for you.
So, Michelle, what are you up to? So we're going to be referring to as A3, and that's the same document that is smaller than what's up on the easier. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry. This is not going to be.
Okay. Okay.
Mr. O'Neill.
He needs, yeah.
me too.
Oh,
Okay. Thank you very much. Yes, I got it.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. O'Neill, for bringing that to the board. All right. Now, Mr. O'Neill, you heard sort of my opening remarks, and obviously you testified at the last hearing. Can you tell the board, and I know they have the parking study in front of them, can you tell the board the manner in which you went about preparing that study, what information you obtained in order to prepare that report?
Right. What we basically did was we looked in, we did a series of visual analyses of the area based upon looking at it at 3 different times of the day morning, afternoon, and evening. We did that during the weekdays because that's when the Board of Education would be open. We determined that the radius around the site would be 1,500 feet. And 1,500 feet is a generally accepted distance that somebody will walk. And I take that not from me, but from, there's an article called Pedestrian Planning and Design by a person named John Fruin, PhD, and it's been published in something called Parking Magazine, if you can imagine that Parking Magazine actually exists, but it does. So we use that rule of thumb. We also then did a second study, which is what I handed out to you, which is based on a 600 to 1,000 lineal foot distance from the site, which your ordinance defines as what's allowed as a remote parking lot. So we thought that if the ordinance said that 600 to 1,000 feet, depending on the use, was considered an acceptable distance to park before getting to your destination, that we would look at it from that standpoint also. We did not include in the study areas to the east of Memorial Parkway. The reasoning for that is that Memorial Parkway is what in planning terms they refer to as an edge. And the edge is a kind of a separator between two different districts. The district being the area on Main Street versus the area where our building is located. So if you look at the drawing, you'll see it's not a circle, it's really a half circle. So the half circle is the area that we looked at. And again, that's really the process. We also did a series of surveys of employees at the Board of Education, I'm sorry, in order to determine what their issues were, if any, about parking when they came to work.
All right, so looking at your report, on page 2 of the report, you you state to determine parking supply, the study gathered information through field reconnaissance. On-site direct observation surveys were conducted at 3 time periods, which is what you've been now discussing.
Correct.
The weekday afternoons and the weekday evenings, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And can you go through your report now, tell the board the results of what your observations showed as to the availability of on-street parking, at least, and the locations of that parking, where it was, and at what times of the day or evening it was available?
Yes. In the area, there are 15 spaces on site, so off-street parking for the facilities, 15 spaces proposed, and within the subject area there are 701 spaces. So we looked at that, and in the 3 designated time periods, the afternoon area, it seems to have the least amount of demand, which is 309 spaces, as opposed to 361 in the evening and 351 in the morning. Coincidentally, one of the times that is of concern about this proposed meeting room is the use of that meeting room for anywhere from 1 to 3 meetings per month, and those meetings would occur in the afternoon. So
I'm sorry, the numbers that you're talking about, where can we find the numbers you just quoted?
they are on
Because I'm trying to follow along.
Right.
With your write-up.
Yeah, right.
Page 6.
They are on page
You're on
6.
page 6?
Yes.
Yeah, when you hit some of your statistics, direct the board to,
Sure.
you know, where they are so they can read as you're speaking about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we also then did an additional study. And it was really Mr. Hirsch's suggestion, and I think it was a good one, which was about the impact of parking on the adjacent residences. And we took a smaller area there. That's where we went to the 600 and a little bit more. We didn't go to 1,000 lineal feet. We stayed about 600 to 700 lineal feet of distance from the building. And what we said that there were, again, I'm going to have to read this. There are 47 residences in that area, which would be bound by Langford and 4th up to, down to 3rd and up to 5th. And, sorry, I'm trying to remember the name of the street. Comstock. And in that area, there are 47 homes, and 37 of them, which is about almost 80%, have their own off-street parking. So they either have garages or long enough driveways to stack 2 cars. Of the rest, the other spaces, there are 10 houses that do not have it. So that, if you look at the totals, the net available parking in that area is 100 cars. Then if you look at the observations we've done in the field, and you take the total number of spaces and the peak usage, that drops down to 58. So they are within the study area, which is really a block and a half away, there are 58 available spaces in the residential areas. And that it takes into consideration the needed on-site parking for those 10 residences.
All right, and on page 6, where you indicated the total gross off-site at 701 spaces, you then have your breakdown of those numbers for weekday mornings, weekday afternoons. Explain that to the board.
Well, again, this is based on looking at the 701 spaces and observing how many spaces were taken and how many were open during those time periods. And those are the numbers that reflect what the use was. The rest of them were, there was nobody there.
So in the weekday mornings is 351. That represents open spaces, used spaces. What's that represent?
351 is the spaces that were used.
Okay.
So if you subtract that from 701, that's the number of spaces available. And that's in the 1,500 foot radius, not the 600 to 1,000.
And then the weekday afternoons, again, that's 309
309
after 4 p.m.
Right.
Which is not the usage period for this use.
No, but it is the use period where it would end.
Okay, where it would end.
Yes.
All right, and the evenings, of course, are a non-issue. The building's not open then, and certainly this conference room is not being occupied then.
Right, and the same issue with the weekends. The Board of Education is not open, so it has no impact, so we didn't think it was relevant to do a study at those times.
Would you go and review your comments on page 8 of the report and where you're summarizing your determinations? I know you've already mentioned what's in paragraph 1, but
Right. So there are a number of conclusions. Yeah, they were just in a different order. So there is a parking surplus within the 1,500 foot area of 350 spaces on average if you take the 3 time periods together. The daily demand of the building does outstrip its off-street parking spaces by between 7 and 13 spaces. Now, on the other thing we gave you is Appendix K, it's up in the upper right-hand corner, and that was this chart or document is in response to comments from Mr. Fitzgerald's office about confusion as to what was in the study and not in the study. And so the area in light green is when the report mentions areas within 1 block. The area in the dark green is the area that it mentions in the report on the same block. The same block being 4th Avenue between Memorial and Langford. So in the areas within 1 block of the site, not including the block itself, there are 72 available on-street spaces, and 26 remain available during the peak use times. So that's basically the light green area. If you go 2 blocks, which this chart doesn't show, the numbers go up to 241 spaces available, and 92 remain available during the peak times.
All right,
Now,
so within 1 block of the subject property,
Right.
that's 1 block in all around 1 block.
Right.
There's 72 available parking spaces during what time period is that?
Well, the peak hour is, we took the basically worst case scenario.
Right. And of that supply, it says 26 spaces are available during the aforementioned peak use time.
Yes.
Right. All right.
And then, and again, if you go out to the second block, it goes up to 92.
All right. And
Now-
and just review your comments in paragraph 2 of that.
And again, the proposed development, which is the expansion into this meeting space, would increase demand 1 time per month for a duration of approximately 2 hours. And that will generate a need for approximately 19 off-street parking spaces based on the situation where all 19 additional people would drive individual cars, which is not necessarily the case, but it's the worst-case scenario. And again, that happens once a month, not counting when the Board of Ed's schools are closed.
Now, there was some discussion at the first meeting concerning, the area that's being converted, that was designated currently, or when it was approved as parking. There was some discussion about it being for compact or subcompact, whatever the term is, cars, because it was small. And they asked if you could check the board what was actually doable there, because there was some question about turning radiuses and what actually could work there. Did you look into that at all?
Well, we looked into, the only thing I could really look at were my old notes. And what we gathered from that was that the board made a suggestion of using what was really warehouse space and was not envisioned at that time to be converted into office space, to use that as additional parking. But you're kind of, it was never meant for parking, so you're kind of shoehorning the parking spaces into this container, which was the building that's in question. We were able to put 10 spaces, but that would only be if they were subcompact cars. So as soon as one person pulls a non-subcompact car into it, it reduces it in half, because you can't back up with a turning radius and pull out because it's too tight. But at the time, the board seemed to feel that that was an acceptable exception, I assume it is, to the engineering standards, and approved it as such. So the drawing that's there, which I guess should be marked.
Did we mark that yet?
It's C104. Shows the area in question as a parking lot, and shows basically a full-size vehicle, not necessarily a Suburban or something like that, but a full-size vehicle pulling out. And as you can see, the gray shaded area, it interferes with the parking space, in this case number, I'm too far away to even see that, it's like number 21. And that would happen with any space. So the reason why part of the reason why I believe no tenant has ever used that space for parking. And the Board of Education, I believe, is the 3rd tenant since the building was approved back in 2005. So nobody's ever used it as such. And again, if you opened it up for parking, the parking removal wouldn't be 10 spaces, it would really be 5. So there is a bit of a difference in your interpretation of that, of the usability or the utility of that space as parking.
All right, and there was also, as you said, you did a survey of the employees in terms of their ability to find parking, in terms of the employees of the Board of Ed I'm talking about.
Yes.
And can you just go over what that was again?
Well, again, of the 21 people who responded to the survey, I believe 6 said that they had trouble finding parking on 4th Avenue between Langford and Memorial. Nobody said they had trouble finding parking not on 4th Avenue between Langford and Memorial. So if they went on 4th Avenue on the other side, I guess that would be the, west side of Langford, that was fine. They had to walk up half a block further. But nobody had that, it was really, because there's, there's 18 spaces, on-street spaces on 4th Avenue between Memorial and Langford. And in all of our observations, certainly during the morning and afternoon hours, they were filled, although some of them were filled with Board of Education employee vehicles. In the evening, it breaks down. There aren't as many people there.
Was there anything else you wanted to cover? I think you
Well, I thought I would cover, I'm sorry.
before I get to planning testimony, that is, but go ahead.
I was going to respond to
Yeah,
Mr.
the board
Fitchter's
engineer's report.
co-
There's a few
comments.
items.
There's a few items there.
Okay.
I think the simpler one,
Well, first,
Okay.
we're now responding to Mr. Fixter's Insight Engineering's report of March 20th, 2019. That's the most current report.
Why don't we get Jason and Duff sworn just
Do you swear affirm the testimony you give during these proceedings will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? State your names and your affiliation with the city.
Don Miller, board consultant, plan.
Jason Fisher, board engineer.
All right, so going to that report on page 2. Page 1 is just a description of the project, of course. Page 2, I think
well, I'd like to, the simpler one is the section marked considerations, number 2.
the ones, well, all right, but you first have to identify anywhere where he says not satisfied from his first
Oh, okay.
report, all right? So the first paragraph on paragraph 1, the last paragraph of that section, which is what you tried to point out a moment ago, some confusion,
Right.
where he says the parking study states, quote, "It should be noted that those spaces were never actually used by any tenants of the building," and he says testimony should be provided to clarify, and that's
And again, I think that's what I just
discussion you
spoke about.
just went over. Considerations, you can go through that now, number 2.
Yes,
That's
again,
paragraph number 2, considerations. Go ahead.
Right, there will be no new utility connections. The building is connected now, was connected in 2005, and we will just expand what's already connected to. There are some ADA concerns. One thing that was decided in a study my clients asked me to undertake was that it became evident that it was more cost-effective and beneficial for the building as a whole to remove the slab that is in the warehouse area. It's very irregular. It's in pretty terrible shape. What we were going to do was raise the floor using wood sleepers and a wood floor system. It became more cost-effective to really just remove the concrete. So the issue why that's important is that the floor of the proposed meeting space will be at the same level as the sidewalk. So there will be no ramp and there will be no internal ramping system. Everything will be on the same level. So certainly if the board was so moved to grant the application, we would, as a condition of approval, meet all of Mr. Fitchter's concerns. But we haven't done that at this moment. Seemed like putting the cart before the horse.
All right. And again, going down to the items, the next item, it says not satisfied. Just so we're clear, Mr. Fisher, if you haven't put not satisfied, the revised plans addressed your prior comments. Is it only the ones that you're saying not satisfied? I don't want to overlook something if you want me to address it. That's
Well, on at the bottom of page 2, we have number 2, and at the top of page 3, we have number 5. So 3 and 4 were addressed.
Okay.
So they've been taken out. So,
Oh, yeah, I see. Okay, you're taking out paragraphs. So,
so the ones that are on there are ones that need to be addressed.
all right, even if it says not satisfied. Okay, all right, thank you.
Yep.
All right, so,
Yeah, this area we just discussed, which is
all right.
Section 5, which is really the ADA
Okay.
compliance issues. Downspouts, again, we intend to pipe them into the existing parking lot, which is where all the other downspouts up that side of the building go. The other one would be in the back and will go out towards 4th Avenue. which is where they go now. And again, we'll provide whatever details or calculations, Mr. Fisher.
So this is all how the existing system works?
Yeah, exactly. And
We're not adding any more coverage or any more building coverage,
We're just
impervious coverage?
kind of rerouting things because of some of the things that are occurring in the building.
Okay.
And the sidewalk detail, which he mentions in number 12, we will revise as necessary. We have no problem with that.
Okay.
If we go back to the beginning, we discussed some of the planning issues with the parking count.
I'm sorry, you're referring to? Go ahead.
Are we on number 12 at this point?
All right.
Because we just did number 6.
Yeah.
Yes, and number 12, again, we don't see there being any new sidewalk, but if there is new sidewalk, we will. If that is what ends up being concluded from this modification about putting in a new slab in the building, then we will provide the detail to Mr. Fisher's satisfaction.
And the last one you covered,
Mm-hmm.
the sidewalk detail was removed. That's the one you
Yes.
discussed. All right, you wanted to go back. We went over the beginning. Go ahead.
Yes, for those who were here last time, there was a debate about the ordinance and what the actual parking count required for the building is. And the debate had to do with a clause in the ordinance, which is 30-59.5H. And when the building was approved with parking calculated by square footage. And certainly that's the way we have calculated it, and that's what's on our documentation. However, there seems to be a debate as to whether that's been changed because the tenant knows how many people are employed. And I believe that there is a irregularity in the ordinance, because it talks about if you have a fixed number of people, then you take that fixed number and the square footage, which really makes no sense, because if we said to the Board of Education, well, how many people do you have? And they said, well, we don't know, then it would drop it back to just square footage. So the key word in the ordinance is the word shift. And it's my opinion that what the ordinance is talking about in that instance is a situation where you have shifts of workers going into a building. And if you think about shifts of workers, there's going to be a time when those shifts overlap. I'm leaving, you're coming. There's going to be a point where there's a lot more cars because I haven't left yet and you just arrived. And I believe that that is what the ordinance is speaking about, and that therefore it does not apply to this application. So I will maintain that the building requires, with the proposed internal expansion, 48 spaces, of which 15 are supplied, and the parking shortfall is 33. That is not what the planner's review says. So it's my professional opinion, and I have a very strong opinion on this matter, that the application of that standard is arbitrary, and it's at odds with the rest of the ordinance, which makes it technically capricious. And I don't, because it does not.
Excuse me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You mentioned the word shift. Where did you, in that section? So how is it at odds with the rest of the ordinance?
Because to apply that standard to a building without shifts is inconsistent with the rest of the ordinance and the manner in which buildings are assessed their parking demand when there are no number of employees known. So therefore, I think, is my opinion, that applying that to this case is inconsistent, which is what I take as the definition of capricious.
Is there anything else in your report, Jason, that we didn't cover?
He went through everything in the letter.
that we addressed? Okay, thank you. All right. We also, I know we covered it to some extent at the last meeting, like on the issue you just were discussing, the planner's report, which is the report, as far as I know, there was no revised report, the October 16th, 2018 report. Yeah, that's what I thought. But we should run through it again quickly for the board, make sure we haven't overlooked anything, all right?
Sure.
So the first page of the report just describes what's sought and the nature of the site. And 1.2 is the parking nonconformity, which you just discussed. We understand that's the main issue before this board, obviously, is the parking issue. By the way, so we're clear. You represented the applicant, or you were his architect. When he purchased the building, I gave some of the history about it being Friedman's Bakery.
Yeah, before that, it was actually before the assembly line, it was an automobile manufacturing building. They actually made cars there.
And once the current applicant purchased the property, and you were before the board, am I correct that the only addition to the building was a 200 square foot connection between two sections?
Approximately, it had to do with the staircase that is between what is now office space and what is now technically warehouse or indoor parking. That area had to be enlarged slightly for building code reasons. So it was approximately 200 square feet of space.
So other than that, the current owner of the building, he has made no changes to the building in terms of expanding the size of the building or putting any other type of accessory structures on the building?
No, not at all.
Excuse me. All right, so again, paragraph 1.2, and again, the planner just mentions what you just discussed about about the reduction in parking spaces from what's existing, and how we believe that perhaps is not as severe as it would appear from the plan because of the usability and the practicality of those spaces. All right. Let's see, on the third page, again, it's describing the nature of the use. But 1.4 was discussing the parking study, which obviously we have now supplied in the version you have now given them. Before, we had provided an explanation by letter explaining when the meetings would occur in this conference room by the Board of Ed, how many people would come, times a day. But now we've done this complete study. So that was responding to the parking study issue.
I wanted to make one other point.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to make one other point, especially those who were not here at the last meeting. Since the building was an automobile factory, it's very strange. I mean, to see be in an elevator that's as big as a large living room is kind of an interesting thing to experience. But the lower floors of the building, because of the weight of the vehicles, are so heavily structured that there are columns, big steel columns all over the place. And so therefore, having an open space where you can have a meeting room is very challenging, if not impossible, within the building. So that's one of the issues, is that the idea of having a meeting room where you can fit all of the employees that are working there is not possible at the moment. It's not even close to possible. I would bet the biggest space can fit maybe 12 to 14 people tightly. And there's no place to have any sort of a meeting. I'm sorry, I just wanted to.
It's okay, no, that's absolutely. Mm-hmm. 1.5 was a consistency of site plan. Now, I know we revised the plans. Have you addressed some of those issues that were raised in paragraph 1.5?
Yes, there was mislabeling of some of the drawings at the scale, and we've corrected that.
Okay. And then 1.6, the same thing. We should resubmit with the scale.
Yes, and we've had that.
You did that.
We've done that. We've revised that.
Okay. Page 3 just goes through the bulk standards for the zone. Everything is pre-existing. We're not changing any of the current setbacks, building coverage, or lot coverage, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Or the floor area ratio.
Nothing.
Nothing's being changed. Everything is as it exists and has existed for decades. Okay. All right, then we go to page 4. Again, it just reiterates a design exception is required for the insufficient parking. We know we need that relief from the board. And again, the comment was, and I think you discussed it, we should address whether and by how much the number of employees will increase for the largest shift as a result of the increase in office space. And I think we covered it last meeting, but again, there is no
shift.
No increase. Well, not only is no shift, there will be no increase in the number of employees in the building as a result of this application.
Correct.
Right. So it'll be an increase on the occasional times when there's meetings, when the rest of the administrators from the school district come to the site for meetings. But
Right, which is typically once per month.
Are not being increased by creating this this conference room.
That's correct.
And again, 2.3 is, once again, we're exacerbating the nonconformity of parking, so we need relief. 3.1 was the reconstructed office entrance.
Right, we were proposing to put, in essence, what they refer to as a storefront system in what is now the overhead garage door. And that would be the entrance directly into the meeting space.
And you addressed how you intend to meet the ADA barrier free.
Yes.
By making it at the same level.
It will be conforming.
Is there any additional lighting? That was another question.
There are we're proposing 2 wall sconces on the area to the rear of the building facing the parking lot, just to get a little more lighting on the sidewalk. So if the building, that area was used by pedestrians, which it would be if it was a meeting room, that there would be enough light there to meet standards. That's a building code issue.
Is there, I mean, you didn't prepare a formal lighting plan for the site. This is the same lighting plan that was approved when the building was approved for the office use.
No, we have.
Or did you put that on the plan?
We do have an additional
fixture. That was added to the plan?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so you addressed that request. 3.3 was, again, about the parking, naturally. And is there how we can mitigate the effects of the on-street parking? And that's what we tried to address in this. It's not necessarily a testimony how we're mitigating it, but how the existing system, street system, can accommodate the need for this office building to increase the internal square footage.
Yes, we're trying to assess the impact.
Do you feel, in your opinion, that impact, will it not have a detrimental impact on the residential area?
No, not at all. I think the number of spaces is very small, and at this point, one meeting per month for 2 hours will have really negligible impact, if any.
All right. And of course, 3.4, that was a request for the parking study, which we provided. 3.5 talked about the prior approval conditions.
Yes.
Have they been addressed in the revisions yet? Covering the fence on the western lot line with ivy or similar vine?
Well, I think that I think we had discussed was kind of a problem because of the fence and the vine and what the vine does to the fence. And
you suggested that was not a good idea.
Yeah, I didn't think it was a good idea.
All right.
But there might be other ways of addressing that.
We'll accommodate, if the board were to approve this, any condition they want related to that, but that was your concerns about the manner in which that's done.
Right, and then, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. And B, planting shrubs.
I think that's a matter of replanting them. I think they've just taken a beating over the years, so my client is more than willing to do that.
So naturally, you'll comply with that.
Yes.
All right. Paragraph 4 on page 5, that just talks about our burden of proof, which I'll get into in a minute, and which I will also cover, but on the variance. So I just want to go on to any other comments. on page 6 of 9, under paragraph A, it talks about the positive criteria, which again I will get into with you in a minute. I note, though, in bold print, the planner had indicated newly created building coverage and side yard setback nonconformities result from there being existing single-family dwellings and garage buildings to remain. I'm not quite sure. We're not increasing we're not changing any building coverage.
Correct.
All right. So I'm not sure exactly what that comment was meant to
Where is this?
address. I'm sorry, it's on page 6 of 9. A, you see what you have in bold, it was in bold print. I'm not sure if we were talking about a setback because there's an adjacent residential structure or something.
Unfortunately, I didn't
I know.
prepare this report.
But you see where it says the newly created building coverage? There is no newly created building coverage. All right. I just want to make sure we didn't miss it. All right, so,
Thanks, Gary.
all right, so other than going through the statutory guidelines, which we'll discuss in a minute, there's nothing else there that we have to address. Let's see. All right, now, on page 7 of 9, paragraph 5 is the relevant land use policy, and they discuss, the master plan. And they talk about the purpose of the parking standards. You want to review that in terms of, development have enough off-street parking to reduce the number of vehicles parked in the public streets.
Right.
We understand that that's the policy. We're dealing with limited land that we have with this building.
And the limited land was always that way. The building is like over 100 years old.
And the second part of this, and it's a quote from the township's plans, the sections of the ordinance that permit off-site parking are intended to encourage developers and property owners to arrange for parking in nearby, quote, parking facilities. And we don't have any nearby parking facilities.
No.
And we understand that parking facilities does not mean on-street parking. We understand that. As opposed to public streets where they cannot accommodate the full parking requirement on site. That addresses two sections of your ordinance, 3059.9 and 3059.10. I only point these out. I realize we cannot qualify for this, but part of our argument is our hardship. But 3059.9, the city appreciates and understands the historical nature of the city and how many of the buildings were built from property line to property line and never had on-street parking or restricted on-site parking. Parking in Asbury Park, I've been coming here since I was 6 or 7 years old. It was in the streets. There was really not a lot of municipal parking and certainly not a lot of parking garages within buildings. That section, where it allows the planning board or the board of adjustment to permit up to 50% of total parking spaces required for uses, and they don't do this both ways, I find odd, which occur mostly in the evening, to be provided with parking spaces devoted to land uses which occur mostly in the day. So you can show it can be concurrent use of certain parking because some people use it during the day, some use it during the night. So the city recognizes the need that not everybody can provide it on site. And that's part of the gist of the parking analysis we've done. 3059.10 is off-premises parking sites, and that's again dealing with sites. The applicant can address his off-site needs through the various, if he can find off-site parking sites, and can demonstrate he's got some type of long-term instrument giving him the right to use that. Once again, though, it's the idea of off-premises parking. There's two manners in which the ordinance has looked at it. If we could meet this by finding an off-site parking site within the, reasonable neighborhood, we'd be glad to do it. This section of the city, where this use is, simply does not have that available. So we've been trying to show, and again, when you look at the shared use of parking, the day and evening, remember, this use is an office use. It's only during till 5 o'clock. This use for these meetings are only from 2 to 3, I think, in the afternoon, as I recall the times. Mr. Hastings here can verify that again. It's a limited window, and while you do define what is an evening use under that, or a nighttime use, and what a daytime use is, single-family homes don't fall within either. It's not one of the designations given there. But single-family homes, generally speaking, people work and, they're during the middle of the afternoon, they're not seeking parking on the street generally. So it's just, these are all just considerations for the board. I'm not saying, I wish we could say we fit neatly and nicely into one of these spheres here. But the site has been what it's been in that area for a long time, and the city understands the need to have some flexibility, we believe, in trying to find parking when sites can't accommodate it. I'm sure you hear parking variances all the time in the city. So anyway, I wanted to point out those specific ordinance sections, and in terms of the planner's comments about any public or private area or garage, and we simply don't have that within our range that we could make accommodations like some of the other uses in Asbury have been able to do. Correct. To satisfy their off-site parking, correct?
Yeah, there's nobody within those lineal feet.
Okay, and the...
Nobody within how many feet?
I'm sorry?
600.
What?
600.
How about the 1,500?
That's not what your ordinance says.
Okay.
It says to conform, you would have to be within 600.
Okay.
That's why we kind of went and did the other amendment to the parking study.
You went to Habitat of Humanity?
No, we went from 1,500. We did another study at 6.
Because they're within 600 feet. They're right around the corner from
Right.
you. Did you go to them?
Me personally?
No, well, whoever did the report saying there's no parking spots within 600 feet.
None that could be basically.
Well, did you go to
leased and
Habitat
rented.
of Humanity that has a big parking lot that's not being used?
I did not go to them personally, no.
So, okay. I guess I flipped. I was going to ask questions.
Thank you for the question. Yes, that would require some type of long-term commitment from another property owner then to.
Yes.
Okay. All right. I'm just going through this real quickly. All right. So and again, the planning goals addressed by the planner's report, which again is focusing on protecting and enhancing the quality of the city's residential neighborhoods. And again, as I have asked you before, you did the analysis of the number of residences in the area, residential structures, the amount of on-site parking they have, because they have their own parking requirement on the ordinance.
Yes.
And the vast majority provide their own on-site parking.
Yes.
All right. And you've gone through,
Vast majority, could you please repeat?
go through the numbers.
We had, within the 600 lineal foot range, there were, I believe, 47 homes, and almost 80% had their own parking.
And by that we mean either driveways
Or garage,
or garages to accommodate at least 2 vehicles.
Yes.
Was that for compliant, like 2 per unit, or just any park?
No, 2 per unit.
Yeah,
So,
we
so
weren't.
you looked at every house to know how many people live in that house, so you know how many spaces?
No, we
You
looked
should
at.
have?
we
No,
looked
that
at-
was not the purpose.
No, I'm
Right.
just
Purpose of the-
clarifying.
No, it's a zone, and so within the zone is a single-family zone.
Okay.
Besides, there's one small apartment complex.
So you assume that it was a single-family zone,
Yes.
and what the requirements are for a single-family zone, that's how you multiplied that?
Yes.
Was there a discussion with the superintendent
Again, I have not tried to enter into any negotiations with neighboring properties. That's not my purview.
All right. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I mean, the supermarket has a fairly large parking lot that's rarely ever maybe a quarter full, a third full. Was there any discussion with them?
I know, I would have to check with my client. He'll give us a chance. I'll see if I can answer that. Thank you.
I have a couple other questions about the parking report. Did I? Oh, you guys?
I just have one question. When you were conducting your study, did you take anything into consideration about the building on the corner across the street that's going to be built out, that's going to require parking on Memorial Drive and it goes from 4th to 5th Avenue?
The only thing we did in consideration of that is we had my senior associate attended the meeting and where the application was first brought, and there were no conclusions about what was going to happen to it at all. So anything there would be purely a guess. We don't know anything about the application or what its impact will be.
Well, we know it's a fairly large building and there are going to be additional people coming, either it's apartments or businesses.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to impact this neighborhood and
Right.
impact it seriously.
But
Undoubtedly.
undoubtedly, but we can't predict on something that is not an application. Like, we have no way of assessing it.
And I'm sure we'll have whatever impact it has will be much greater than the impact of this application to add a few hundred square feet for a conference room. But yes, it's going to keep happening in Asbury, there's no question. You guys are growing very well here. It's been very successful.
Couple questions.
Sure.
With the parking counts, do you have exact dates that they were done? Because, I mean, typically you would want to count a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday.
They were done on a Wednesday.
On a Wednesday?
The-
Okay.
The date, I'm not exactly sure.
So it was done on one day or multiple days?
The formal count was done on one day at 3 different times.
And you think it was fall time period? I guess my only concern, school was in session. Yeah. Okay. With respect to the ordinance requirements, I respectfully disagree. I think that it would have been nice to have shown what the requirements would have been with the number of employees known. I think it is pretty clear if you know the number of employees, you provide 1 space per employee per shift. In this case, there's 1 shift, and plus the 1 space per 350 square feet. If there were multiple shifts, then you would usually take the worst case scenario for shifts, but there's only 1 here, so it would have been nice to see that number compared to the other requirement.
Well, I believe that number is in your planner's report.
It is, okay. Just a couple of things I wanted to mention. There was some talk in the report about potential additional dedicated parking supply. The Bradley School, I think that's bus lane, was looking at, was that the parking spaces in front of the school?
What we were talking about at that point was, were there alternatives from property that was controlled by the Board of Education within the 1,500 feet that could be used as kind of a worst-case scenario? And we talked about the Bradley School, we talked about the high school, and spaces around there.
So I'm assuming it
what
was
was possible.
behind the building, because in front of the building, it's no parking Monday through Friday, 7 to 5 p.m.
Right, but what
Yeah.
what some districts do, not
Yeah.
necessarily Asbury Park, is
Sure.
that they provide permit parking for certain school employees for use at designated times.
Gotcha.
So in the project description, refer to 25 administrators, and you say a portion of that is part of the staff. So what is the actual number of on-site staff year-round? Because the parking is calculated based on 25 people. Is it 25 regular on-staff?
There are,
Or is it the 25 administrators?
I believe it's 20, I think that the total is 27 people.
Yeah, that was Mr. Hastings' testimony.
Right.
October 27 employees in the building.
Right, and that's why when the administrators meeting is had, there are, I think, 8 people who would go to that meeting who have offices in the building, so they wouldn't affect the parking because they'd already be there. Hence the 19.
Yeah, the portion that you're referring to was an analysis, as he said, of the school sites from which administrators come to this school for the
Right.
meetings when they come.
Right.
And spaces that would be available at those sites. If the board had considerations about utilizing those sites, we could, but you're talking about providing transportation or something from those sites, probably carpool.
But the point of the report was that, I'm sorry. No, I was just saying that's what the 1,500 feet, since those areas were within the 1,500 feet, we thought it was important to bring out the fact that they could be used using the standard of 1,500 square feet as being the maximum distance.
And within 1,500 square feet is the high school.
1,500 lineal feet.
Is the high school and the Bradley School.
Yes.
So, and I guess this would be a question for Mr. Hastings later, unless you guys want to answer it. So, the Board of Education has been renting this building for 4 years.
I believe that's the current.
So where have these once-a-month conferences been held? You're saying there's no other place in the building to be held, so we've had no conferences in 4 years?
Yeah, I'll bring Mr. Hastings back.
I think Mr. Hastings should
he
answer
answered that
that.
question at the last meeting, but we'll bring him
Right.
up again. It's been a while.
Again, maybe you know since you've been around, 2005, and I think I asked us to look into it, maybe I didn't, maybe you should have. When somebody built this building in 2005, they had to have a reason to put these parking spots inside. And I don't know if that was a decision by the past planning board, and now are we going to revoke some by past? I mean, you're saying nobody's ever used them, then why did you build them?
It was a suggestion by the board.
No, it was a condition of approval.
It was a condition of approval by a
Right.
past board.
The applicant specifically
Okay.
requested a variance for the parking, and the way the board entertained it was that they were required to place and reconfigure that inside and increase the inside spaces. It's in the conditions of approval,
Right.
and evidently that wasn't done.
Well, the purpose of my saying suggestion was that's where the idea came from.
Okay.
So maybe suggestion is the wrong term, but the board brought that up as a suggestion.
Well, in 2005 to 2019, as you well said, the parking at Asbury Park has gotten a lot worse. So why should we revoke something that was put in place when the parking wasn't bad on, I live on 4th Avenue, and I go by it all the time, and when you guys say there's empty parking spots, with all due respect, totally disagree with you, because as much as you said you did not go east towards Memorial or anything, well, you got to, because Interfaith is there. You got the apartments by Georgie's and everything, where we lost spots because of the New Jersey Transit and everything, so we lost a lot of spots there. And that, with all the new mall between Sunset and 5th, and all the new businesses going to that end of Asbury Park, and as Yvonne mentioned, that Braverman building, whatever now, the Jamal Douglas building, I mean, it's going to be a nightmare. So, I mean, we know we have parking problems, so why should we make them worse? And I know you can't answer that question, but I'm just batting things off the top. And they're the same things I brought up in October. So nothing's new. I'm not hitting you with anything new.
Well, the only thing that we responded to was the parking study, with all due respect, somewhat disputes your assessment of the immediate area. I think we're on different pages, which is fine. It's just that that's where we're at the moment.
Right, and as much as you say, like, the suggested walk-in is 1,500. Tell the guy who owns the house there, walk 5 football fields to get to your house because people are parked in front of you. And as much as you say, like, you didn't do a survey, there's a lot of people like myself on 4th Avenue who are retired. And right, you do have the apartment complex on 4th and Langford, which I don't believe have any parking spots.
Correct.
Right.
We took that into consideration.
Okay, so
In the report.
right, so that's not a single family, that's an apartment complex.
No, but we took that into consideration because, again, it was residential and it was in the study area.
I've got a couple of questions.
Sure.
The parking study seems to conflict with prior testimony. As I see your study, you have 10 employees who work in that building on a regular basis, plus you have somebody.
27 employees.
27 employees.
Not according to.
Well, only 10 filled out the survey.
Well, the survey was done as administrators and employees, so staff and administrators did a different survey because we thought it was more relevant that way.
So you have 21 people here who responded.
Yes.
And as I recall, either prior testimony or in this report that there was only 2 people who had a problem finding on-site parking. Is that correct?
That was the group that, of internal employee demand, not the administrator demand.
How could that possibly be?
Well, as I said, this is.
If only 10 people responded, there would only be 10 spaces that were taken up. I mean,
21 responded.
now that you are talking about
I'm going
internal
by
employees.
testimony. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
right. No, you're right.
Right.
There was 21 respondents.
21 responded.
21 employees responded.
Okay,
Right.
total 21.
11 are considered administrators and 10 are considered employees. So
Okay.
they're.
And you never considered opening up that parking garage that was approved 15 years ago to let your employees park there? It seems,
I know that the prior 2 tenants desired not to have it used as parking.
Doesn't matter.
No, I'm just saying that it wasn't like that somebody was told they couldn't.
they weren't told
Nobody-
they could either. I mean,
I would have to ask. I would have to let Mr. Georges answer that question because I wasn't part of the lease agreements,
Okay, and,
so I don't know. And when we were the architects of the building, there was no tenant.
okay. And you just indicated that because of the location of the steel columns and stuff in the building, you can't have a conference room, correct?
Not of any
Any
significance
significant size. Okay. Have you considered, and I think I brought this up a couple of months ago, have you considered keeping the garage or the parking garage on the first floor and putting a second floor on there, put your conference room on the second floor?
Again, you could.
I'm sorry, was that proposing a second-story addition? Is that what
Yes.
we were
instead of-
suggesting?
Instead of using the garage floor as the floor of your conference room, how about putting a second story on and put your conference room on the second story? And that way preserves your 10 parking spaces.
Well, we appreciate the thought. Again, we like the board to keep in mind the analysis that we showed you with that parking plan. And what the reality is, you can show 10 lines on a plan, or 10 spaces. These are not spaces that would meet your ordinance requirement. There's not a parking aisle that would meet the requirements. And I acknowledge that's the plan that was approved, but to put a regular sized car in there, you maybe can get 4 cars, maybe, because you can't turn and maneuver to get cars in and out. So I know on the face of it, the approval is a condition and a resolution. We're not trying to argue to the contrary. We're trying to present the reality and the practicality, and one of the reasons people have not been using the area to park in, it is not a very reasonable or convenient area to park a car in. Now, if you have very small cars, you may get, what do they have? What do they call them? The midgets or whatever, those real little ones. Maybe you could get a few of those in there.
Did anybody check, you have 27 employees that, with your questionnaire, did you check and see what size cars they're driving?
Mr. Hastings told us there was only 1 employee that would own a car that would qualify.
Have you ever tried to reconfigure the parking lot?
It's just not enough space. If you reconfigure, the spaces drop. And so what that study there was to say if you did reconfigure, you could maybe have 5 spaces, 4 to 5.
I find it incredible in today's day and age that only 1 out of 27 people has a small car. That's incredible.
I agree with you, but when I drive, I see it constantly.
So,
And I drive a relatively small car.
Dave, the SUV.
Question, what day of the week are these meetings held? Because on Mondays and Tuesdays, Habitat for Humanity store is closed, so they have like 8 to 10 spaces there. Maybe you could work on an agreement with them as well. I mean, there seems to be a couple of lots that could be available that you could maybe work with the owners to provide space, to acquire space in their lots, so you wouldn't have to necessarily.
yeah, I think that we brought that up as a recommendation in prior discussions. The other thing is that I was just concerned about, to say, okay, now we're saying that how many how big is this conference room? How many people could it fit? Because we're saying that we have 27 people in the building. How many people are coming?
If we.
All right, so you got
do need-
27 plus 19.
Right, right.
All right, so you've got like 46 people that potentially could be in that building and take up space. Now, perhaps I'm naive, which I might be, but, or maybe you are, I don't know. If we say we're gonna have a meeting once a month, and now we have this beautiful conference room, why wouldn't we have more meetings? Wouldn't it? It's kind of like you build it, won't they come?
On the flip side, I for the life of me can't understand why such effort and resources will be put into doing this conversion for one meeting a month when there's plenty of other buildings in the district that could hold this meeting.
Right.
So I'm not sure why we're exacerbating a parking problem while not adding any residences or businesses.
Right.
For once a month meeting.
Yeah.
That's
why it's.
But my understanding is that the meeting facility is primarily for the people who work there now.
Yeah, I think is
So where do they meet today?
what we were trying, and I'll bring Mr. Hastings back to explain that. What they're trying to say, there's two things going on. You have the current employees that are in the building, okay. They need a room to have a bigger room for conferences, just the people that are in the building, okay? So they're occurring a certain number of times. Then you have this administrators meeting is what we were, and why the board focused on it, because that's when we were bringing additional people that don't work in the building to the site. And that's administrators from the school system, okay? So it's not just that meeting, it's also so the building is more facilitating to the existing employees in the building to have a room they can meet in, and then to accommodate, which is bigger than probably they need just for them. But they have all these little cubbyhole meetings, 5, 6 people, because of the nature of the construction that was there. So it's for the current 26, 27 employees, plus when they have these administrators meetings, additional 19 people come. Some of those people in the building are part of that administrators meeting, and then we add some people. So that was the worst case scenario that we were addressing in terms of that impact. And I know it might be a little confusing, but.
Where do they meet?
That makes more sense.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, ma'am.
I said, where do they meet today?
As I said, I'll bring back Mr.
Once a
Hastings.
month.
He
Hastings
did
should answer
testify
that.
to this at the last hearing, but I will bring him back. Board members have any more questions right now?
This is for, do our board professionals have anything that they would like to add? That hasn't been addressed? Okay. Do we have any, are you going to bring up someone else?
Yes.
All right, so then at this point, we have to see if there are any public questions for the witness. Anyone from the public that would like to ask any questions about this topic? No? Okay. All right, your next witness.
All right. I'm going to bring one other witness, and then I'm going to bring him back to
Okay.
conclude with his planning testimony at
Okay.
the very end. But I wanted to get all the testimony in. You sort of got 2 hats here, you know,
Okay.
at least. I just want to call Jeffrey Hastings back again, the representative of the board, testified at the first hearing. Have a seat, Mr. Hastings. All right, Mr. Hastings, I want to cover a couple of things and then address questions you heard the board raising. First of all, can you briefly give the board a sense of the areas where the Board of Ed has located its offices and how it came to be in its current location, and what, if any, difficulty it has had in finding a location for its offices?
Well, the Board of Ed was originally on Park Avenue years ago. They moved from the Park Avenue address to 407 Lake, which is in, I believe, a redevelopment zone. Board of Ed was there for a number of years. Board, along with the city, then moved. We moved to 603 Madison and had an arrangement with the parking garage that was across the street on Bangs Avenue. And then after 4 or 5 years there, we moved to the current property.
And why did you move?
The superintendent, the state monitor, the Board of Ed felt it was a better location, easier for people to get in and out of. If visitors were coming, they didn't have to worry about parking and paying for parking and getting in and out of the Board of Ed building to conduct their business.
And you then located where you are currently?
Correct.
All right. And this is a location that the board reviewed and had to have approved by the full Board of Education and superintendent?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And what is your experience since you've been at this location? The board, when I say your experience.
Right. Board of Ed and the central office staff find the building fits all the needs, most of the needs that we have, aside from this conference issue that we're discussing. The experience there has sort of been a 10 out of 10 in terms of the space and the utilization of the space, and it's solved a number of convenience problems that we've had at other locations.
Just so the board can confirm with you, how long have you been at the site, the board?
Board has been at the current site for 4 years.
Right. And we discussed, I know at the first hearing, you have options to renew this lease.
I believe we have 2 5-year renewal options.
And the current term is a 5-year term.
Correct.
It's been there for 4.
Correct.
And the board has a limit legally on the length of time it can lease it.
Enter into agreement, correct.
Right, it can't just lease something for 20 years because legally it's not allowed to do that, correct?
That's correct.
And at least at this point, based on your understandings, do you understand that there's an intention, at least at this point, while not a legal commitment, but an intention to stay in this location by the board and to renew your lease?
Yes, and speaking with the superintendent about the current location, her feeling is it's a good location, and her intent, I understand, is to renew the lease.
And there's been questions asked by the board members. What were you doing before these meetings in terms of we're asking to try to improve this current building for your employees that are there and for your administrators that can come to these occasional meetings?
Right.
Why
So
now? Why here?
So there's 2 different types of meetings I guess we're discussing.
Right.
One is the meeting with administrators on page 5 of the parking plan or parking study. It indicates that administrators meeting that's currently held at our high school in the media center there. We have folks from around the district go to that location. If you look at page 5 there, the administrators meeting is 26 attendees, 7 of which are on site already at central office, which would bring 19 other staff members, administrators to the location. The other types of meetings that we're discussing that would be convenient in this particular conference room location would be more annual training meetings for the staff in the building itself. So most recently we had a security meeting where we were updated on security procedures and threats and lockdowns and fire and all those sorts of things. And to have the staff of 27 attend that meeting means you're usually spilling into a hallway or into an open area on the floor, usually on the 3rd floor. If there's instruction on AED usage and those sorts of things, again, we're spilling out into a hall and doing those with people standing and listening to the instructor.
All right. So in terms of the administrators' meetings, which occur, what'd you say, once a month or twice a month?
The administrators' meeting occurs once a month, and it's usually prior to the monthly board meeting. So there was a comment about a Monday or a Tuesday. Our board meetings for the current board are on Thursdays. They've been that way for a number of cycles of board members. So this meeting usually takes place the Thursday morning. Oh, well, not Thursday morning, the Thursday before the meeting.
And so, in summary, would the using this site in terms of its location in relationship to the various other schools where administrators at, do you feel this is like a central location that's convenient, most convenient for the administrators to meet in?
Yes, and I believe the feeling was that the superintendent, as the moderator, the creator of the meeting, wants to be, at that location and have people come there, and then if she needs certain things, it's available. you're not bringing stuff back and forth to another location.
So at your this is your central office?
Yes.
Okay, so this is why, her view, in your view, is the best location to have this type of meeting room?
Yes, that's something the former superintendent and current superintendent have talked to with the landlord about potential improvements to the building. This was one of the issues that was raised as a request.
So this request came from the Board of Ed to the landlord requesting such an improvement to the building, correct?
Well, to the superintendent, yes.
I mean, through the superintendent to the
Yes.
landlord.
Correct.
All right. And so that was the genesis of this. It wasn't the landlord just coming in and saying he wanted to make the building bigger. This was tenant's request.
Right, it was an ongoing discussion about the use of the building and improvements and what can we do to make things, better.
All right. That's all the questions I have for Mr. Hastings. Open them up to the board if you have any.
Board have any questions?
So was there any discussion with the supermarket owners about?
Or Habitat, or?
So we haven't had discussions with those particular business owners. My only concern there would be paying for parking for this sort of thing, and whether the board would want to go out and lease or purchase spots and spend funds on that sort of thing.
So I understand this is at the behest of the tenant, but you have moved, it's a lease and you guys have moved a lot. So if the use were to change, the landlord is not the applicant here. The landlord is the applicant.
The landlord's the owner, so yes. The landlord's made the application. But we wanted to give you the genesis of where the need came from.
If the use were to change, though, with this
Which-
parking, go to.
Right, if the tenant changes,
Yeah.
the use would change, most likely.
As we're also, Mr. Hastings indicated, he can confirm again to last meeting, the board has the right of first refusal to purchase the building also, in addition to its long-term lease.
Yeah, and this gets into, I was gonna bring this up later.
Yeah.
Right now. These variances are use specific.
Okay.
Because they'll wind up in the same situation you're in now. You have
Right.
a tenant that's been there for 4 years, that has additional parking requirements than Checkmate that was there originally.
Right.
And there's non-compliance with our ordinance from
Yeah.
that. So if the variance is going to be granted
For this use.
parking, it would have to be use specific, and that in the event another user goes in there, these variances have to go away by operational law, because the next user probably will have the same
Same use.
parking
Yeah.
requirements that this user.
Thank you for clarifying, because I think it's important.
That, we'll have to address the fact that if we do get that far, where we're going to put that within the records of the city, so that situations like this don't happen again.
Yeah.
Jack, if we approve the conference room as proposed now, and we lose those 10 parking spaces.
Well, the 10 parking spaces, they're telling you they're not using them, but go ahead.
Well, but they exist. Another planning board has approved those 10 parking spaces, and technically they still exist.
Well, they have to be, we don't even know if they've been configured to exist. You don't know that.
No.
But, okay, I get where you're going. You're saying you have to put 10 cars in those spaces. But if they can't physically do that, then they're gonna have to find another location. But what would you?
Well, basically my question is, in the event that the board leaves this particular address and goes someplace else 5 years down the road, does that conference room stay, or does the parking in that space revert back to?
Whatever parking is in effect, whether it be from the last site plan or this site plan, that's the parking that would be permitted for this specific user. The conference room will physically stay there. That's not going to change.
Right.
But you probably would require either a site plan application or application before the zoning board of adjustment for variance if there's no site plan application.
All Does the board have any other questions?
Yeah, I'm still confused with these numbers. I go back to page 4, and how many internal employees are there?
There's 27.
27. And, and 7 of those are administrators? Or,
7 of those 27 employees would attend the meeting that we're discussing is at one time, once a
well,
month meeting.
we're talking about internal employees and administrator demand. What are the actual numbers of internal employees? 27?
Correct.
Okay, and how about, there are 2 classes of employee on that site, correct? Administrators and internal employees?
Correct.
Okay, how many administrators are there?
7.
Yeah, correct, 7.
So there's not 27 people there, there's actually 34, is that?
No.
No, I think you get,
Yeah.
you're getting hung up on the characterization of the type of people that are there.
Right.
Total quantity of employees, whether they're administrators or clerical workers, are 27.
Correct.
Right.
Okay,
That's the total.
That's
That's
total.
when the building's
That's-
full,
And
it's
you're
27
saying that when
people.
you have your monthly meeting, 7 of those 27 attend as part of
Right.
the other 25 or 26 attendees. So you're looking at a net increase of 17 or 19 people.
Right, that's the net increase,
19.
for that once a month.
okay. And you also said that you picked that site in particular when you were relocating from, what's it, Madison Avenue, that this particular site was to help accommodate visitors. How many visitors did you get on average in a day?
I could only guess. It would vary day to day, obviously, with the types of transactions that are being conducted. We have students coming for working papers. We have parents coming for individual meetings with child study team directors. I couldn't give you in a good faith sort of a daily
Where
number.
do they park?
We have 3 dedicated spots in the existing 15 that are within the site for visitor. There's also 2 that are unmarked, I believe, at the back, sort of towards where the garbage collection is, and then the rest would be on the street.
So in effect, you really don't have 15 on-site parking spaces?
They do have 15 on
Yeah.
site. You can't change the
For
number.
employees.
But some of them
Employees.
include visitors, you're right about that, but the number of spaces are what they are.
Yes, but, okay. Anything gets worse.
Right, any other questions from the board? Any other questions from our professionals? For this witness? Jason? Donna? We okay, Donna?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, we're opening up to the public for questions for this witness. Anyone? Okay. We have another witness?
Thank you.
Yes, I'm just gonna, I'd like
Okay.
to bring back Mr. O'Neill. All right, Mr. O'Neill, based on your prior testimony in terms of your parking study, your testimony response to the engineer's report in terms of site issues and the planner's report relative to site issues, the testimony you've heard from Mr. Hastings, I'd like you to provide us your opinions relative to your planning expertise, all right? So,
Actually,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
sorry,
Absolutely.
I
No.
knew he was coming
You got
back.
questions? Go ahead.
Well, it just sparked a question, because again, I didn't have the benefit of the October
Right.
testimony, and I'm, still sort of digesting the testimony about the study. Mr. Hastings brought up an interesting situation about the visitor parking. So how did you account for visitor parking as part of your analysis? You talked about how many people are on site as part of employees, how many people are coming to the site as part of the administrator meetings. was there any of this other visitor or other?
Well, we looked at, we knew that there were visitors, although not a high volume. We, again, in our interpretation of the parking demand of the building, did it by square footage, and the square footage would accommodate that use, or that amount of parking.
We need to, in other words,
So you're saying
the lack
In other
of,
words, the
the
number.
variance we need is the calculation based on square footage of the building. We need X amount of spaces. We have Y amount of spaces. The difference is the variance,
Okay.
regardless of its employees, visitors.
Except that the board has to take into consideration how the use and operation actually is affecting, versus the square footage, that demand.
Yeah, no, I, yeah.
So,
Right.
all right, so I
Yeah.
wanted,
I don't disagree.
It's a great point, there's visitors. But that's like brand new for me, so.
Right.
Yeah.
But I would also think that these visitors probably have to sign in, so you would know that they're in the building, so you can count them up. If you needed to, towards the future, just saying. Just
Yeah.
guessing. But most businesses have signage.
It probably could be quantified.
Right, they could be
Yeah,
quantified.
they-
But okay, so
We
let's
did
continue.
answer some of those questions at the last meeting. I understand you weren't here. That's why I brought Mr. Hastings back. It's been a long time. They did ask that question at the original meeting. Do you have visitors? And it was the same thing. Some kids coming, students coming for whatever, working papers, things like that. Parents come see an administrator. It's a hit and miss type of thing with a visitor. It's not like a retail business or something where people are coming every day for a specific purpose. It's on a need basis. And of course, the students generally are walking, not driving.
I would think if this question came up several months ago about visitors, that it would have been specifically addressed in the study. It was never mentioned until Mr. Hastings just brought it up. So if you were aware there was a question or concern in October, that it would have been included, specifically addressed, not just.
I didn't understand any specific concern. I understood the overall questions that were asked at.
It's an additional
The concern
number.
was
I'm not trying to argue the point about it. I'm just trying to say he did provide the same testimony at the last meeting. That's all I'm saying. The question was asked, do you have visitors? And he responded.
Right, so
That's
we're
all.
saying that it's able to quantify how many visitors that is in a given day that could have been included in here, at least addressed in some way. I'm just saying.
It's such a hit or miss thing. I don't know. Maybe they could have given you
Okay,
better
is
than
there
Mr.
anything
Hastings
else?
in the building. What
Is
can
there
I tell
anything
you?
else that Mr. Hastings will be providing us?
I'm sorry, ma'am.
Is there anything else that Mr. Hastings? I'm sorry. Are there any more? Is there any more testimony?
Well, I haven't started with him yet. They had questions.
So my follow-up now is, shoot, I got distracted. These 19 potential other administrators, where are they typically?
They're at the other schools. Principal at the Bradley School,
Okay.
All the schools in the system.
Yeah, in the schools in the system.
Right.
And that number was given to us by Mr. Hastings. We asked him for that, what that number was. and he
So
told
they're
us.
parked elsewhere, normally, as part
Normally.
of the typical Monday through Friday, whenever they're.
At whatever facility they were.
They're either parked on the street or at their schools where they can find parking related to the other schools in the district.
We did also bring up, although we didn't really quantify it too much, that there are certain people in the building who go and leave for a significant period of time and are not in the building because they're
That was
at
discussed
the other
in the first
facilities.
meeting.
But we didn't quantify that either because it's inconsistent.
Right, but your snapshot in time is the one day, the 3 times a day, the 3 times during the day on one day, in
Right.
the middle of the week,
Mhm.
to give everybody a sense of what is happening as far as demand.
That was the change.
Yeah, okay.
That was the focus because that was the change. Everything else is how the building has been and operated, since it's been there. We wouldn't be here about that. The change was the additional 19 administrators that come for that monthly meeting. The other administrators are there. So to answer the other question I was asked, there is a need as the building exists for that room. But the only change in terms of the operation that's been there for this Board of Education is that now that will be the center location for that meeting. That's why maybe it's gotten a little confused.
All right, can we continue?
Okay, man, I'm sorry. We got to ask
Let's
questions.
go, because we have another applicant that's right behind you.
I'm sorry. I know.
Okay.
I know you do, and we appreciate your patience.
Okay.
All right. As I was sort of giving you an intro into this, having listened to all the various testimony and the exhibits that you've had. First, in terms of the positive criteria to justify this parking variance, we need to establish whether there is any hardship related to this site compared to other sites, and then address whether, if there is, how that balances against any negative. So would you address for us first the concept of a hardship to justify the parking variance?
Well, the first hardship is obviously it's a fixed site. The building has been there for over 100 years, so nothing has changed. The parking lot that exists was basically the loading area of the building when it was a commercial bakery, and before that a car manufacturing facility. The other hardship, so they can't expand. The other hardship is the configuration of the building, because again, it was built as this car manufacturing center. So therefore, with the columns and column grid within the building, there's really no way to have a room to accommodate all 27 employees at one time.
I have a question.
Okay.
This is the point where this is the time to ask. Is it correct that the B2 zone permits shared parking on other sites? Is it a correct reading of the B2 zone that it requires that it permits shared parking on other sites within the zone or within a certain distance?
I believe it does.
That being the case, if no one has gone to the corner property next to Hollis, which is certainly very close, and explored the possibility of locating some of your parking needs there, you haven't established a hardship because you haven't established an attempt to comply with the ordinance.
Correct.
Okay, so then the criteria for the positive criteria can't be established until someone has gone there and made an attempt to get some parking there to see if you can lessen the variance that's been requested or meet the ordinance in full. Correct?
Correct.
So
So again, I would have to, I don't know whether my client has explored those possibilities.
who would we ask? The owners of the property? We asked Mr. Hastings, he didn't do it.
No, Mr. Hastings wouldn't know.
Mr. Hastings wouldn't know.
The owner of the property would know that. The only other issue I would, tender to you, which Mr. Hastings brought up in his testimony, and I understand.
You're not going to talk about money.
No.
Okay.
Well,
I know you long enough to know that you're not going to talk about money.
What I'm going to talk about is that this is the Board of Education, okay? That the use is, if this were a school use, if the board owned the building, we'd be talking about an inherently beneficial use. This is the taxpayers' money, okay? This is public funds. So if I'm going to talk about money, I'm going to talk about it only in that context. So I would sum up on this, but this was part of the concern that the board had is finding a site that doesn't require that kind of long-term commitment, because remember, your ordinance requires evidence of a long-term commitment if we're going to meet that ordinance per se. Other than somebody saying, well, you can use it, but if I say you can't next week, you can't next week. You can use it for 6 months, but then I could take it away. That's not what your ordinance envisions. It envisions a long-term commitment on somebody else's property to take part of their property and use it, which is a long-term financial commitment that the board would then have to enter into. So we just think that's a consideration for this board and understanding the inherently beneficial nature of education, the Board of Ed. The schools don't operate without a Board of Ed and its employees, and the need for them to have space and to try to preserve public funds instead of entering into yet another lease and another contract. So that's how I would respond to that comment. However, if the board, I mean, I've heard the questions, and it's not that it wasn't discussed previously, but if the board feels that they want to hear a final answer on that they want the owner to get up here and say, I went to ShopRite and I went to whatever the other Habitat, whatever they may be, and here's the deal. They said no, they're not interested. They said yes, but only on a license, a part-time situation, or whatever they say. If the board feels that is information that would help them come to a determination here, then, you know, I would recommend to my client we carry it and come back. That's why I wanted to complete as much as we could complete and provide you that information.
Is the owner here tonight?
He is.
So you can bring him up to testify to the question you just asked.
Sure.
Question, and I'm sorry, you were going back to your witness. Who's paying for these renovations?
I'm sorry, who's paying?
Paying for this renovation?
For this application? Oh, who's paying for the construction?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I assume the landlord.
Because, and I'll go back 15 years ago when the city was building a boxing ring. And I said you could put them on a limousine, take them up to Madison Square Garden with Gus D'Amato, cheaper than that boxing ring cost. So you guys could, with this renovation, this is not cheap. This is hundreds of thousands of dollars. You could go to Jimmy's restaurant for 20 people for the next 10 years and be ahead of the game. And I'm just saying, Jimmy's, you could go any place. I mean, you could rent a hotel conference room cheaper than this renovation is going to be without impacting the neighborhood and losing parking spots. So it's not a question like, you know, I'm curious who's paying for it. Is the Board of Ed paying for it? Is the owner paying for it? And because it's not going to make a difference in my vote whatsoever. My vote is more about, like, we're asking other applicants before you, behind us, we have a problem with parking throughout the city. So and you're the Board of Education. I was on the Board of Education for 12 years, so I'm well versed on it. And I appreciate the great job Jeff and everybody does, and appreciate the great job that the board members do. Most thankless job in America, but you know, we still have a parking problem, and it's not going to get any better. So my concern, and again, as Yvonne said, that big elephant across the street from you guys, that one day is going to be something. And then again, with everything else that you didn't go look at east of Memorial, which is like coming west to where you're at. So my problem is the parking.
I understand that's the
Okay, thank you.
critical issue.
And also the ability to, if you can't fit 10 cars.
I'm sorry.
And also if you can't fit 10 cars, like you were mentioning that you can't fit 10, and you can fit 5, okay, let's do 5. You know, or let's do 4.
Yeah,
we need to make some progress here.
The trade-off here is balancing what we believe is not an unreasonable development and improvement of an existing commercial site in the city with the impact that has on the neighborhood, the residential neighborhood, and on street parking, etc. Now, I understand you have other uses, and some might say we need 60 spaces off-site, we need 50 spaces, all sorts of numbers. But I only suggest that we can't stop dead in letting buildings improve and letting buildings get redeveloped and get improved without a fair balancing of what the benefits are and what the detriments. So when you talk about the building across the street that may create the need for 100 or 200 parking spaces or whatever, We appreciate that. But let's keep in mind what this is asking for. This is not asking for, he's not coming in and said, I want to add another 10,000 square feet to my building or another 5,000 square feet to my building. I have a building. This is how it's been historically. It had 15 parking spaces. Before the planning board approved the change, that's what it had, okay? So we just want you to keep the balancing of this. What is the severe impact when you've heard all this testimony? So that's why we did an analysis, what's available. So for a couple of hours in the afternoon, when who's using it, who's not, you need some additional spaces other than what already exists today. That's why we kept saying this is all the new stuff. Everything else exists, okay?
But
there's got to be some balance.
I agree with the balance, but has there been an effort to mitigate the parking problem? Like what Jack said is there, like in order to have a variance, you have to have shown proof of a hardship.
Right.
But you didn't approach the other property owners.
Well, that's what.
So have you tried mitigation?
Yeah, that's the question I was just responding to a moment ago. I agree with you. I agree that's what Jack raised, and as I said, if you know, I'll bring the owner up. You can certainly ask him, but as I said,
if I'm sorry, go ahead.
We will, you know, if that is important to you, as opposed to saying
yes,
it doesn't matter whether we do that, you know, we're not interested, then we're happy to give you the response from each and every one of those, whatever there are, 3 or 4 potential properties that they say yay or nay or whatever. But
I think it's important to the positive and negative criteria.
Well, we would do
so.
that.
You can't establish the positive criteria without demonstrating the hardship. The gentleman answered the questions, honestly. So, and there has to be a good faith effort to get the spaces. It's not just going to be, we talked to them and they said no. That's one thing. We talked to them, they might want money. It's got to be something that you can't just say, okay.
Well, we'll give you as much specifics as we can. I mean, I'm glad to put a letter to them in writing saying this is what we're requesting. I can't, as you know, there's no way I can guarantee them responding to me in writing.
And we understand
You know that. You know how property owners are. They can just pass it by and say.
As long as it's not window washing and just a pro forma letter that's not going to get a response, there has to be a good faith effort to try and get to talk to them about the park. You know. We can show you the attempts we make, but I've been in this situation before where property owners, they're not going to respond. Then you bring that in with your planner and tell us that's
part
of our hardship.
That's exactly my point. I just want it to be clear that you can't guarantee that response no matter what effort we make. I've been in that situation.
Understood.
I try to deal with their attorneys, with their owners, try to get parking in other places, and sometimes it's not interested. They won't even bother giving you that in writing.
No, I've been in your shoes on that side of the table.
I know.
Let's continue on.
Well, something tells me I'll be like the amazing Kresge. You're going to ask for this to be carried and not vote tonight. So I would respectfully ask then, instead of bringing up more witnesses, we just carry it so we hear the next applicant, just because they were scheduled.
All right.
If that's where you're headed.
I think
if you're headed for a vote tonight, we'll continue to hear.
May I take 1 minute?
Yeah.
Because then they go say,
There's no other way. Or if you do. Exactly.
What is it, Easter?
Way to empty the room.
Oh, yeah, that's fine. So it's Good Friday before that.
He's Rosemary.
I have my computer.
Would you like your sweater?
Yeah.
I'll switch with you the next one.
Hey, Barbara.
I'll leave that one to you guys. I have my computer right here. Put them on, no, not. It's a curse. I asked myself that. No, I work for the state. I have a flood control project.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much for giving me the time. I appreciate your courtesy. Yes, we will carry it. I don't know if, so we're on the same page, if there's a list of lots that you think are within the area, somebody wants to confirm, so we don't come back and say, well, gee, why didn't you try this one? And we
Have your parking consultant figure that out.
But I will. I just don't want a disagreement with our parking consultant when he does come back.
Let's look at the 1,500 square feet you
All right.
want me to walk.
Okay, all right. As long as we understand that that's what we're talking
And
about.
I, just as long as you're asking for
Yeah.
suggestions, I would also look at the maximum look, instead of you're doing like average, daily, tell us when you have the most number of visitors. It happens to happen seasonally, whatever. Maybe it's during the first week of school, maybe it's during the last, but you have logs, so just look at what the maximum
All right,
demand
we will.
is.
You understand, I mean, that doesn't change this application, whatever they are, and they've been for the last 5 years, it'll be for the next 10. But
More information.
but we'll get you whatever we can.
Okay.
And the other thing we'll do is we'll verify whether there's some shuttle arrangement or anything that can be worked out with the schools, the other schools that we've talked, which we gave you the information on, if you recall, the 4 schools. All right, so we'll look in.
I have to
We'll look into
pay-
that, and I think everything else we've done, other than him concluding his opinion on the planning testimony, we're done with our witnesses, other than this narrow piece of information that you want.
All efforts you can show at.
I'm sorry.
I said, all efforts you can show at attempting to mitigate the parking variance is what I'm like.
Okay, I appreciate that. Yes, yes.
April 22nd?
Pardon?
April 22nd, is that?
That's the next available.
I know I'm not available.
Oh.
I'm out of state.
May 6th?
May 6th? That would be good.
We need your consent on the record to extend the time within which the board has to operate.
You-
to give your decision.
You have my consent on behalf of my client.
I can have a motion to.
Move to carry the application to May 6th without further notice.
All in favor?
Again, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I appreciate your patience and your input.
Thank you.
And your question.
And I did see administrators walk to a meeting from the high school to the building, so I go up and down Fourth a lot.
Good exercise.
Yeah, and that was in the wintertime.
John gets to leave. It's not fair. I'm really taking checks.
I didn't want to assume you were
No,
moving
no,
forward.
no, come on up.
Yeah, we would be the third if you don't mind.
Are we all set to get started? I'd just like to give you a fair warning that we have 1 hour. The doors close at 10.
Oh, okay. Is Jason?
I don't know.
Do we have to do a roll call or anything?
Yes, come back to order.
I know. It was the paper I used. It was not in my office.
Yep. Let's get rolling.
Back on the record.
I have a pen.
59.
Don't take yours.
Councilwoman Clayton.
Here.
Mayor Moore.
Here.
Mr. Henry.
Here.
Mr. Manzella.
Here.
Ms. Seibach.
Here.
Ms. Souter. Here. Ms. Taylor.
Here.
Mr. Lambert.
Here.
Chairperson Cruzat.
Here. Okay.
Okay, good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. My name is Kimberly Bennett on Fox Rothschild LLP on behalf of the applicant R-Bar AP LLC. This application is for preliminary and final site plan approval for a mixed-use building that does require some bulk variance relief. The applicant is seeking approval for the construction of an addition onto the existing restaurant located at Main Street between 3rd Avenue and 4th Avenue. The property is known as 1112 to 1114 Main Street, which is more specifically known as Block 2805, lots 18 and 19. It is located in the Main Street redevelopment area, specifically in the community shopping zone, which obviously, as you know, supersedes the underlying zoning. The site presently contains the former Cascada Bar nightclub, as well as a non-conforming multifamily residential dwelling use, which will be removed as part of this application. The applicant is proposing to construct an approximately 835 square foot, 2-story expansion onto the existing restaurant. The applicant is proposing to operate a neighborhood restaurant and bar, eliminating the previous nightclub type of use. 2 residential units will remain above the new restaurant, which is encouraged and permitted under the Main Street redevelopment plan. The proposed expansion is primarily necessary to expand the existing kitchen and food preparation areas. The addition will also be the location of a new wine and cheese bar, as well as a second floor and outdoor seating area. The application does require certain variances, as I previously mentioned, though it does meet the goals of the redevelopment plan. The project requires variances for front yard setback, rear yard setback, side yard setback, number of signs, having a neon sign, and off-street parking. The setback conditions are existing, and the testimony will show that in order to mitigate the lack of off-street parking available, the applicant is proposing a shared parking solution. Further, design waiver is required for the proposed window transparency to wall ratio. At this time, I would like to introduce our witnesses for this evening.
1 second. Let's take care of some housekeeping. Review the notices, they're in good order, so you have jurisdiction to proceed. And you mentioned that there was no new variances. Does the addition that's being constructed also require one of the setback variances, that the pre-existing building is going to be squared off?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure which side you're, which.
Let's just see.
There is a new.
Rear yard setback. There's a pre-existing non-conformity for the rear yard setback for the current structure.
Right.
You're adding on to one structure, and it's going to be the same setback.
Right.
So that does require a setback variance.
Right.
Okay, all right,
Right.
that's fine.
Yeah.
You said there were no new setback variances required.
I'm sorry, majority of the setback variances are existing.
I get it. I just want to make sure.
However, some are slightly different, though they do already exist.
Good. No, I get it.
Okay, on behalf of the applicant, if I may present Ms. Kelly Victor and Lindsay Taylor. They're two principal partners of the applicant, though they do serve different functions, and though they sort of have a joint presentation to explain to the board the restaurant operations as well as the site operations. Is that all right?
It's up to you. We did that, I think, the last time we converted it to an informal.
Okay.
That was when we had it as informal.
Yeah, but it's up to you.
I mean, I'd rather go with the, with having the planner and an engineer, and go like we would normally go through all other planning board meetings.
Well, it's the applicant's representative, and I was just mentioning that they were going to present together. We then, of course, have our architect, our engineer, and our planner.
And then other people on top of that? So let's stick with the three. You got a planner, you got an engineer, and you got an architect.
Mm-hmm. Well, we have a representative from the applicant to just explain what the application actually is.
Well, yeah, if you want, they did that the last
Yeah,
time.
we already did informal. We already did.
Yeah, right. It's not on the record, though. That would be my only concern. I would want to make sure that they present it as actual testimony.
You know the timing.
Okay. Well, at this time, may I have all my witnesses sworn together?
Sure.
Is that okay?
Then you can qualify them and everything else.
Just swear all my witnesses in at once.
Okay, I don't do that.
Okay, well then I'll break them up.
Yeah, I mean.
That's fine.
Yeah, it doesn't really save anything.
Okay, at this time I'd like to call Ms. Kelly Victor and Lindsay Taylor on behalf of the applicant, R-Bar AP LLC.
We are confident with our informal and would like to just go forward with the rest, if
Okay.
that's okay with the board.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
You can reserve on the record the right to call your other witnesses.
Okay. I reserve the right
Okay.
to recall them if we need to.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so at this time I'd like to call Mr. Jeff Welts, our registered architect.
Please raise your right hand. You swear or affirm the testimony you give during this proceeding. State name for the record.
My name is Jeffrey Wells. I'm a licensed architect in the state of New Jersey and a member of the AAA. I'm the owner of Welts Architecture and have been in practice under that name for 15 years.
WELTZ?
WELTZ.
Good evening, Mr. Welts. Can you please explain to the board your relationship to this project?
I've been overseeing the project and I've been involved in the design process and up until this point for the plan.
I would like to submit Mr. Welts as our expert in architecture. Is he accepted?
That's great.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Welts, can you explain the present site conditions?
Well, currently, if you look at this board here, and I think you have a copy, we have an existing bar and nightclub, which we're going to propose alterations to, and we have a 3-story residence, which we are proposing to demolish. I can go to the architectural specs and briefly go through the plans.
What sheet are you looking at?
We're looking at S1 site plan.
Okay, and that was submitted with our application, right?
Show them what?
It was part of the submission.
Yeah, but I still, you're going to testify it on the record? Put it in there. Make it
Whole set?
Yeah, just make it Exhibit A1, consisting
Sheet
of
S1.
how many pages, or A2, whatever it is.
Consisting of 6 pages, 10 pages.
Okay. That's A1, site plan?
Correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
That's one. And I'm, just the overall scope of work, we have the existing bar and nightclub. The addition is going to be a 2-story addition with wine bar kitchen on the first floor and rooftop dining and conservatory on the second floor. Will be an alleyway for access to rear yard sitting and dining, and a stair that gains you access to the second floor of the rooftop bar. The entrance for the nightclub is going to remain the same. The entrance to the residence is going to remain the same. They're both on Main Street. And the entrance, which will be ADA compliant, will be on the side into the wine and cheese bar.
If I just may interrupt you for a moment, you said the entrance to the nightclub. Now, this is not actually a nightclub any longer, is that right?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
We're changing it from a nightclub to a restaurant.
Okay, so we're retaining the existing entrance from the nightclub.
Correct.
Okay.
So going to D1, it shows the existing nightclub, and we're proposing electrical demolition and renovation. The main entrance is going to stay. The main entrance to the dwelling is going to stay, and the existing 3-story non-conforming dwelling is going to be demolished. Sheet A1 shows the existing basement to remain, and it shows the basement of the new addition. The addition is going to include a prep kitchen, and office and storage. And within the new addition, there will be internal circulation from the basement to the first floor to the rooftop garden. The first floor, or ground floor, the proposed bar and restaurant, we have a new bar, seating area, and more intimate seating area. Through the bar, there's a connection to the wine bar, and where you have the ADA accessibility. Bathrooms are going to remain. There'll be access to the outside and back through the rear. And the bulk of the addition, as you can see on this plan, is going to be for the new kitchen. And again, the kitchen integrates vertically. You can access the prep kitchen below and the roof above. Behind you have the washing area, and then you have access to the outside dining. Also, as part of this drawing, you can see the enclosure for the waste, and you can see the ADA ramp, which is adjacent to the entry to the rooftop dining stair.
It's a lift, correct? Not a
It's a
ramp.
lift.
Yeah.
On the second floor, you have the apartments, 2 apartments to remain, 1 apartment becoming a proposed storage. We have the dining, which overlooks the main street, a conservatory, which encloses the bar area, a dining, which overlooks the outside backyard dining area. And you can see the stair that accesses the second floor. Enclosing the stair, enclosing the outside dining is a pergola. Enclosing the bar area, as stated before, is a glass and metal conservatory. And the back area is enclosed by a pergola as well. Because now I'd like to go to the elevation and just discuss briefly.
Can we mark that?
A2?
I think that was
I
all.
don't know what-
Actually, there's a handout set now to be.
Sure.
Okay, and that's just a blown up version of what's on the set?
Do you want
Oh.
this to be distributed?
Yes.
It's part of it.
Mhm. Was it
It's
distributed?
contained.
So you want to make this entire package A2?
No.
Yes. No.
Make that A2, each one individually, because the board is gonna look at them individually.
No,
So,
but this is how I have it.
all right, then, okay.
We can mark each sheet a different.
All right, do it all as,
That's why
The
I'm
boards
A1.
correlate with things that are in the handout, so,
no problem.
okay.
Right, so you want the whole thing, because you have individual pictures also, so you want this whole thing? Everybody?
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah, then just mark the boards subsequently. Yeah.
Well, I'll only,
Right, I'm saying mark that A2 and then mark A3, A4, A5, whatever the board's are. That would, right?
now do you want me to distribute these?
Please.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter. Yes. Just keep marking the boards and then.
Why don't you guys pass these?
Yeah.
Pass those down.
Thank you.
Okay, we're fine. Okay, we're good, because we have.
I'm sorry. That's okay.
So if you go to the
Is it the
third page of the exhibit, that coincides with this board here, you can see that to the left is the existing building with alterations, and on the right is the addition. We're proposing refurbishing the existing opening, providing a new door with glass side lights. And the entries to the residence, we're suggesting, if we can, to salvage the existing stone surround. And the entry to the wine bar is articulated on the far right with the awning. In general, what we wanted to do was we removed the ephes from the first floor, I mean the stone from the first floor and the ephes above. We're gonna replace the stone with a stucco, and we did bring samples of black cementitious stucco. And we're providing a rain screen above over a rubber membrane. And the rain screen, the design of the screen is supposed to convey a coastal sort of vernacular and also maybe a New Orleans sort of flavor to it. The color we chose, we wanted to pay homage to the existing buildings that have become iconic in Asbury. If you look at the first page of our exhibit, you'll see the carousel, convention hall, and casino. So we thought this color fit in very well. The goal of the shutter type articulation was to break the scale down of the second floor. And we're proposing new wood windows. We're adding to the transparency of the residence. We're adding a window into the lobby. The addition is mostly glass with wood painted trim. Above is a metal pergola with wrought iron type detail. Behind the wrought iron type pergola, is a conservatory made of glass and aluminum or steel. Really, when you think about it, the whole elevation is quite transparent, both the first floor and the second floor. I guess I'll touch upon the sign. We're proposing a perpendicular blade sign to help articulate the entry. It It is a neon sign, because we feel that it gives the bar an identity and brand. We'd like to propose that. We have a menu sign and we have a wall sign. So it will be, that's one of the variances required. The side elevation should also. There's some three on here that shows the ADA entrance, the pergola on the side, a stucco finish in the first floor, the trash enclosures below the cantilever conservatory. You walk down the alley on a subtle grade and you walk up the stairs to access the second floor or to go past and go to the outdoor dining on grade. There were concerns with the neighbor about screening, so we're proposing a screen in the corner of the second floor outdoor dining area integrated with the pergola. Here we have on the fourth sheet, we have a rear elevation, which I don't think we can it shows the covered stairs up to the second floor, the handicap lift, screen, that blocks the neighbor, because their property line is here. It blocks it perpendicularly and parallel. This is the north elevation with the bar sign, the entry articulated with the sign and the top canopy. And this is a look at the proposed outdoor dining area entry.
Okay, Mr. Wells, if I could just redirect your attention to the front facade. I think you had a board marked A3. Can you just briefly explain to the board the purpose of having the residential entryway sort of laid out the way that it is in terms of color and scheme, and also how that impacts our ability to meet the window to wall ratio?
Well, I guess the goal was to give each entry its own identity and to work with what we have. I guess when you're talking about the undulation of the screen top, I think there was a suggestion to have that go straight across. We did study that, but when we looked at it holistically, really the datum includes the copper entry, and the line goes straight across when you look at the components in balance. So the screen dropping down here sort of changes the scale and sort of understates the entry for the residential, while celebrating and making it more articulated for the entry to the bar and restaurant.
Okay, and does sort of blending that residential entrance have any benefit to the people who live there? In terms of confusing patrons?
Well, no, again, I think making the entry surround painted black, it implies that it doesn't get your attention, it's understated, so it's obvious, or we're hoping that it's more obvious that the entry that has the copper canopy, the bar sign, the menu board is the entry for the commercial space, as well as to the flanking the other end, where the wine bar is.
Right, so if we tried to add more windows and glass to that area, it sort of would have defeated that desire to blend the entrance.
Right, if you're looking to give sort of each part of the building some identity, adding more glass to this is conflicted with the purpose of having a more overt entry for the restaurant.
Okay, does anybody have questions for Mr. Welts?
Yeah. So could you have added more glass to the restaurant entrance instead of the like tiles around, or that piece of blank wall? I think that's next. I'm trying to remember from the floor plan. Next to the coat room.
Again, we're sort of working with what's there.
You did add some glass to the residential, is that right?
Right.
So make sure it's not just a black wall.
Right.
Right, but I appreciate that you're trying to make the distinction between the residential entrance and the commercial entrance, because you don't want patrons, you know, just drifting into the apartment entrance. But maybe more windows. I'm looking at the floor plan now, so I get that there's a beer cooler in the front that kind of limits the window opportunities. But then there's a kind of a large section of wall before you get to the coat check that seems like could be a window opportunity. Is there something about that wall that doesn't allow it to be a window?
We want to keep the design integrity. I mean, there's symmetry with the entries and over the windows above. If we push glass out to the right or to the south, it would become unbalanced.
So the area next to the door, like within that archway, that is all glass, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All glass.
Okay.
Right.
So
But we
is
do
there
need a waiver.
where the residential part is, there's the wall comes out, like there's a like projection and
Well, there's an existing stone.
no, I mean not the door, but the whole wall.
Yes.
So like it's not the blank wall between the entry to the bar and the entry to the residential. It's actually not a flush wall. It's got like a
there's an
setback and
existing
a projection. Right?
offset.
Sorry, say that again?
The wall between the entry to the bar and the residential actually is not flush. There's a slight projection for the residential part.
So that's
That's
also
not what's
back.
shown on the plans.
You can see it on the, if you look at the facade, the existing facade, you can see it. If you look on the proposed facade, you can kind of see the line of demarcation where it's projected.
We're comparing it to the floor plan, the architectural.
They show it one straight
Straight
wall.
line.
But that's actually, I guess it's not a direct representation.
So the plans aren't accurate?
No, well, the issue is we're not sure what's structural, what can be removed from the inside. When surveyed, that bump wasn't apparent. So we're hoping, again, we don't know until we remove the stone exactly what that offset's going to be. I think it's shown on the survey, and the survey was done with the stone present.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Wells?
Yeah, I have two questions. You said the residential is on the second floor?
Above the existing residential is above the existing bar and restaurant.
So where, they have no windows then?
Well, the area that has no windows, we're proposing that it be storage.
All right, so they wouldn't be looking out onto Main Street then? The
Second
residential?
floor.
No, they do, yes, they do.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Is it those
The one, if you look at the one.
Oh, all right, so that's, oh, okay. And then the other question is on the bottom where you have wine and cheese. Now, that's only for when you go inside to sit down and purchase, it's not retail where people look at that and think they can go in and purchase something and leave.
Correct.
Okay.
I have a question about green elements, sustainable elements. Yeah, first of all, I think the architecture is really interesting, and I appreciate the trying to draw on some of the iconic architecture. It's really, really vibrant thing for Main Street. But I'd seen some of the comments from before, and I was wondering what green elements you're bringing into this, looking at some of the materials.
We're proposing impervious pavers, which will allow percolation through what is now mainly concrete and impervious pavers. We're going to use high efficiency or LED lamps, so the lighting will be green.
We're reusing an existing building as well, which instead of tearing something down and building something new.
Please speak into the mic. Please speak into the mic.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Are there any other, and I noticed also some comments about the existing trees, and I see there's an effort to maintain some. In terms of, and I appreciate that there's a lot of attention to the plants in general, but it is a tough site in terms of keeping everything alive. So will there be attention to protecting those trees?
We to use a horticulturist or a landscape architect to assure that the existing trees aren't harmed. It's our client feels very strongly that the trees need to stay because it does create atmosphere for the backyard. So we're not looking to remove any trees or farming.
Board have any other questions for this witness? Do our professionals have any other questions for this witness? Does the public have any questions for this witness? Okay, next witness.
Okay, thank you. At this time, I would like to call our professional engineer, Bashkar Halali.
I do. Sure. Bhaskar Halari. Halari is Halari, a professional engineer. Bhaskar, that's Bhaskar. Sure.
And your qualifications?
Sure. I'm professional engineer since 1994. In the business of site planning, subdivision design since '88. Our office is in Manalapan. I have testified on numerous boards in southern Middlesex County and northern Monmouth County area, yes.
And this is your first with us?
First with you, yeah. I come up to Neptune and that's where it stopped, I guess. Now I just skipped over one more town.
Okay.
Next time I won't have to say that.
Okay, Mr. Halari, can you briefly describe your relationship to this project and your familiarity with Asbury Park's city ordinances?
Right, we basically prepared the site plan. There is not a lot to design here. It's a pretty small site, but we did look at the township ordinance, city ordinance to design the plans and came up with the proposed plans.
Okay, and can you very briefly just describe the property as it exists today and what we're going to propose in terms of site improvements?
Is an aerial photograph of the site we have obtained from State of New Jersey GIS system. It's a photograph taken in 2015. It shows the site in yellow outline in the center of this board. The main street is in the center of the map going up and down, north to south. 4th Avenue and 3rd Avenue, the site is located in between those two streets. It's not very clear, but the existing white roof you see is an existing building, which is currently a nightclub restaurant. And just to the south of it, you see a little brown roof, which is a structure, which is 3 foot. And then there is some backyard where there is a freezer box and also a concrete pad back there, which is being used by the residential tenant that's located on that property. What we're proposing to do is architect has outlined that information already. That exhibit A9. The exhibit A9 shows the site plan, which is basically covered for the presentation tonight. You see a purple, which is the existing building. Orange is the proposed expansion that architect just described. Brown is the patio area, which is primarily a paver block construction, which shows the rear yard where there'll be an outside seating area and access to the rear of the site, which is located on the south side of the proposed expansion. All the way to the rear, there is a enclosure which is intended to be used for furniture that will be placed in the rear patio area. You can see the 2 planters that we have made an effort to save the existing trees that we just discussed. There is total 3 existing trees on the property, and the plan is to preserve all 3. There is about 4-inch diameter tree that's located to the rear property line, which is kind of out of the way for all the construction we are doing. And there is 2 good large-sized trees, both located close to the property line, and it can be easily preserved by going around them. And that area in the back is actually an outside seating, so we don't have any defined boundaries, in the sense that if we need to make it bigger and adjust in the field to provide more space for the existing trees, we can easily adjust those. And we intend to hire a tree expert who will advise us. Most of the work that is around that area, they make sure that we do manually, like digging the existing concrete and whatnot, not use any heavy equipment to affect the existing root system of the trees. And their whole idea and the vision that they have for this backyard, those existing trees are really integral part of it, because they want to create the historical look. And the age of those trees will show you the age of the area. So they want to preserve that. We have provided a recharge system, which consists of a yard inlet with a 24-inch pipe with a stone around it, which will collect the runoff from the rear portion of the patio and recharge into the ground. So that will basically reduce the amount of flow going down to the main street, because the entire site drains from east to west, so all the runoff is going to the street. The new roof that will be constructed on the building would also be connected into the existing curb line with the roof drain, and that's how the existing building also drains to the main street. We will evaluate the capacity of existing utility like sewer and water. If need to be, we would have to upgrade or expand those, and we will do that in conjunction with the meeting with the utility agency. We would provide a new electrical service, because the demand for electric will probably be higher because they have bigger kitchen and more equipment. So those will be upgraded. And as architect explained and showed on the elevation, all the recycling and refuge area is located along the southerly wall with the gates and enclosures. All the gas meters which are located along the main street is going to be relocated along the southerly wall and will screened off from the main street. All the electrical meters and all that. Accessibility, architect already discussed that we have provided here accessibility to both floors from the front and the back. Other than that, I think they have a very good vision. They have spent a lot of time trying to come up with what you see here, and they're trying to basically do what the redeveloped plan envisions, something upgrading existing, making better looking. Also, changing the existing use from the nightclub to a restaurant is going to reduce the number of patrons that will be visiting. We also eliminating 3 apartments, which will also reduce the parking demand. So overall, just by doing a change of use, we're going to reduce the parking demand because occupancy is going to go down of the proposed use. On top of that, our client has worked out an agreement with Habitat for Humanity to provide additional off-site parking, which our client will discuss with you. And they can bring you up to date to that information. And our planner here tonight is going to be testifying about the waivers and variances, and he will bring up more of that information.
Would you please just talk about the pervious versus impervious coverage? Can you clarify that?
So impervious coverage is pretty similar to the existing. Main difference is we are eliminating existing concrete surface and replacing that with the paver blocks. And in our stormwater design, we have not taken any credit for that. We assume all of that paver area as an impervious surface. So we are still reducing the flow by providing a recharge. But in reality, we all know that the paver block will tend to give some permeability and will recharge the runoff into the ground. As far as total impervious on the site is still below the 90% that required by the zone. So we're not looking for any additional changes to that respect. I know the planner's report has pointed out that there is a higher impervious. But it seems like we checked all the calculations. We'll provide that to planner just to reconfirm. And also, as you can see in the patio area in the back, we have some patio that if we need to reduce that area of the patio, we have flexibility to reduce 2-3 feet if need to be to stay below the number that is allowed by the ordinance. So we did not intend to exceed that impervious coverage.
Okay.
Regarding the stormwater, you said that the roof drains would be through a curb drain. Is there any opportunity to connect that to an existing inlet?
Well, this is one of the comments in the engineer's
Yeah.
report, and we will look into that. I didn't have adequate time to investigate that.
Just because right now DOT is reconstructing Main Street, and I know it's become a major concern that businesses are basically providing the roof drains right onto the street instead of into an inlet.
Understood.
So.
So what we could do is, I did see when I visited the site, there is an inlet in the front of the country farm, which is right next to us. I don't know whether that inlet goes across the street or is it there's a parallel system along our front edge. So I need to do some investigation. And if we could connect into it, our intent would be to connect into it.
Okay, great.
And that was one of the recommendations by your engineer, and we're going to discuss with him and see if there is potential, then we'll definitely.
And then regarding the bike rack on the side, or the proposed bike racks, what's the width of the impervious pavement? The impervious pavement.
6.93 feet, so almost like 7 feet you can say. That is the total space. And the bike rack you can design with a different angle of the bike, so you could accommodate that in a 3 feet needs to be. So we'll still have a 4 feet of a walkway clear.
Yeah. We could probably talk about it, as one of the conditions of approval, but the bike racks probably need to go parallel to the building because you need to keep an ADA path, and then also the bike itself is 6 feet long. So even if you angle it, you may not get enough room.
So we have to provide parallel, but our intent is to provide as many bikes as we can, space for as many bikes as we can.
Excellent.
Okay, and otherwise, will we be able to comply with the remainder of the comments in the engineer's review letter dated March 20th, 2019?
Yes, we intend to comply with all the items. There are certain items that the engineer specifically has asked us to testify. So I will just go over those items so I can just address those. But we will otherwise, if I don't discuss the item, that means we complying with it and there is no purpose for any discussion. Item number 15 discusses the parking plan. And as I just briefly mentioned, our argument for the parking. And our planner is going to come up and further testify to that. And item number 21 is also again the parking waiver request. And our planner is going to be discussing that. Item 23 talks about solid waste disposal and how are we going to coordinate the residential and commercial garbage. The residential containers will be within the foyer area that is inside the entry door. So they will have their separate containers, and the restaurant employees will be emptying that every day at the end of the day, bringing out the garbage. So they are not the one who has to walk out to dispose of their garbage into the regular outside recycling bins. That will be managed by the employees of the restaurant.
Is that shown on the architectural plans?
No, but we will make sure that it appears in that.
In the foyer?
In the foyer. Item 27 about the signage, our architect discussed about the sign requirements. Item 30 is discussing how it will impact the emergency vehicles. Overall, the existing the residential unit that is there is 3-story, the total height of 35 feet. What we are doing is reducing the height of the structure by making it only 2-story, which is like almost 29 feet total. So we are making it a lot more accessible because we're reducing the total square footage and the height of the structure. So that should help in part. Item 31 discusses about the street trees. We have one street tree in front of our site currently there. There is no other street trees on both sides of that main street. So I think we are much greener, quite honestly, to begin with. But if there is a potential to put another tree, we will discuss with the township engineer, and if they feel like there is a spot that does not block our entrances or the view of the building, we will be glad to comply with that.
It should also be noted that the city does have a TAP federal grant to do streetscaping on Main Street after the construction is complete. So,
Okay, so great, maybe then,
yeah, there'll be trees coming in
that
regardless.
will take care of that. Item 32, I touched upon all the utility connections and coordination that we would have to do with each utility agency, which we will do. And stormwater item 38, I discussed our effort in reducing the amount of flow going down the street by doing a recharge. Item 39 about freehold soil approval. The site will be exempt from that because we have less than 5,000 square feet disturbance.
We have our letter to that effect also. We just received.
Applied to the freehold soil for exemption letter, so we should get that.
Yeah. You want to bring this as an exhibit?
Sure, yeah.
Oh, we already have that.
Yeah, so it'll be A10, I think.
Item 41 is again about the recycling and the dumpster area, which we discussed previously. Item 42 is again about the parking, and our planner is going to further testify to that. Item 46 is again about the streetscape, which you just mentioned that the city is in the process of doing the improvements. So maybe that will address that. And if we need to add after that, or during that, or we have a plan and the engineer suggests something, then we will be glad to incorporate that into our plan. 47 is exterior mechanical equipment. I just discussed that we're going to relocate all to the side. And item 51, which is discussing the purpose of this enclosure in the rear, which I just said, storage of the outside furniture for the patio area. And 54 ADA accessibility, which our architect touched upon. So those are the items that I wanted to talk about. But besides that, we'll comply with all of the items.
Okay, and I just want to point out, including number 48, Mayor and Council approval is required for our encroachment into the right-of-way, and of course, the applicant will certainly make the appropriate applications. Are there any questions
from the board?
I just had a quick question. I'm sorry if I'm not reading the plans right, but on the first floor, there's no openings allowing light in from the south side on the first floor, right? Am I understanding that correctly? No windows? So you have the wine bar and then the kitchen.
This is the only opening to the wine bar.
The entrance door only.
Right, so there's no way that light gets from that side into the actual restaurant part, right?
Yeah.
But into
Not
the
from
wine
that
bar,
side.
yes, but not
And most of this area inside is kitchen, right?
on this side.
This is all kitchen.
So
it's
inside it is kitchen. This all area is occupied by kitchen.
Right, so there's no, I think maybe some of the comments were already, I mean, you've been talking about them, but the light, is it intended to be like a closed? Like a,
Light and wine is
so for the wine bar here.
All right, we need you to be
Yeah, you're gonna testify, you gotta read it all.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Sorry. No eye contact. So that, I understand that, but, so when you get into the renovated restaurant part.
This blank area is behind the bar.
Right. So is the intention, as the architect, the intention of the renovated restaurant, not the wine bar, to be like a dark, cozy?
Well, it's more intimate. It provides alternative feeling to the other areas within the establishment. But there are large windows on the main street.
Mm-hmm. On the facing west.
Yes, so
Right.
these windows go into that cheese and wine area.
Correct. I just meant really actually the other part, the main restaurant.
Well, this.
Right, which I know we were talking about before, but is the intention there? It looks like it'll be a very dark space. That might be the intention.
Well, it's supposed to, give a sense of privacy and commiserate him. And it also, again, with the symmetry to go to one side.
And it's also directly connected, right, to the country farms on one side.
No, we're talking about any additional glass.
Oh, okay.
And again, as pointed out earlier, the plane there it does step forward, so it isn't continuous. It's not
Right.
easy to
No, I understand. I was trying to understand the plan because the two reasons I was asking. One was sort of the life back to the street, what you're doing with the wine bar, and that there's activity inside that's shared, so that there's activity on the streetscape, sharing back and forth. And the second part is just whether the intention was for it to be dark.
The intention is to have different experiences in different parts of the restaurant.
And part of that was getting back to the green building aspect, that if it's dark inside, I mean, if there's opportunities to get more light inside to do that, that's why I was asking about the intention of the sort of atmosphere. Because every opportunity to get light in, then you reduce the lighting needs. That was kind of why I was asking the question. But you answered it. I was just understanding the intent. And then my second question, if you have more, you can. Back to the rain screen. So that's wood. That's painted wood.
Right. We actually have a mock-up here.
Yeah.
So it's.
Do they have to mark that?
No. Unless the board wants it. If the board wants it, you gotta mark it.
We always like seeing things.
But if you go to
yeah, no, it's fine. Yeah, my question was actually about certified, if the wood can be specified as certified wood, because there's a lot of wood, meaning like forest steward. If there's going to be wood, that much wood used, could it be certified, like forest stewardship certified, something like that, so that's greener, just because there's a lot. I don't mean green color, green.
No, I understand. We have to do that.
It's just a question. That's why I was just because I asked the wrong people the questions I was asking, so it's all covered.
I thought you were going to ask how
about like
yeah.
No, I saw that in the drawing. Thank you.
Okay, so I guess we can meet that. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Any other questions from our professionals? Okay.
Okay, now.
Members of the public? Anyone?
Sorry?
Okay, you just want to make sure.
You're supposed to ask members of the public, that's all.
Cross-examine witness.
Anybody from the public would like to have a question? Okay, let's move on.
Okay, now, just very briefly, I do have a memorandum of understanding for our parking agreement that I was going to have my applicant authenticate. Can I just submit this to the board representing what it is, or?
Okay. It's got signatures on
Yes.
the pages and the line?
It does.
Okay, that's fine. Why don't you give us the substance of it? It's a short.
Sure, it's a 2-page agreement basically that Habitat for Humanity has agreed to sublease to the applicant approximately 25 parking spaces. Now, as you are aware, there is no parking on the site as it exists today. So we're taking what is 0 parking spaces and doing our best to provide something for this site. The agreement is that our bar will be permitted to use the property Monday to Saturday after 6 p.m. to midnight, Sunday all day, and for some special events planned in advance and subject to Habitat's approval. The money would also be sort of like a charitable contribution to Habitat. It goes directly to Habitat, so In any event, that's the shared parking agreement that. I'm sorry?
How would people know to go and park there?
Oh, I'm sorry. It'll be a valet service. So there will be valet in front of the building who will move the vehicles. It's not that somebody would have to walk across a block or two, or however far the distance is. The valet service would do that for them. Okay. At this time, I would just like to.
Let me ask you, that lot is on Memorial you're talking about?
That's correct.
Okay.
The address is 1105 to 1109 Memorial Drive.
This is one block over.
Okay. At this point, I would like to call our planner, Ms. Allison Coffin. For the fastest variance testimony you've ever heard.
Do we want to hold off on this? Because we have pretty much 5 minutes, and I don't want to undercut what.
I'd leave that to the board if you want.
This is the last witness?
This is the last witness. If we want as a board to decide that we're going to go forward and listen, that's up to you guys.
How long is your testimony?
Yes, how long?
Depends on how many questions you have for me at the end.
We have a handful of variances. We have those existing setbacks. We do have a few minor new setbacks, as well as our signage and parking variances.
I know you.
All right, let's go. Let's start, and it's,
Yeah, okay.
see how far we can get.
Usually, you know how long you're going to take.
Let's go.
Okay, can I have my witness sworn, please?
Do you solemnly swear affirm the testimony given during these proceedings will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do. Very fast truth.
For the record.
Allison Coffin, Coffin.
Thank you.
I have a bachelor's degree from Boston College. I have a professional planner's license from the state of New Jersey. I'm certified by the American Institute of Certified Planners. I have appeared in Asbury Park many, many, many times in front of your zoning board, but I can't recall the last time I was at the planning board.
Okay, let's go.
Let's go.
Okay.
Let's go.
Is Ms. Coffin accepted?
Yes.
Thank you.
Just want to let me off my leash and I'll.
Okay, go for it.
Okay. The property in question we're looking at is 6,100 square feet. It's an L-shaped parcel and it consists of 2 tax lots. Lot 18 contains a 3-story, 3-family residential structure, which is a non-permitted use in the zone. Lot 19 contains a mixed-use building with a restaurant and nightclub on the ground floor and 3 apartments on the second floor. The applicant's proposing to demolish that non-conforming multifamily structure on Lot 19 and construct a 2-story addition to the mixed-use structure. The addition will allow for the renovation of the restaurant to a high-end dining establishment with a wine bar, which eliminates the nightclub use. It includes an outdoor rear dining patio, a second-floor bar, which has an enclosed bar space, and outdoor rooftop seating with occasional live music inside. But the nightclub-style music that is currently part of the use would be discontinued, or previously part of the use. The second-floor apartments would be reduced in number from 3 to 2 for a total reduction in residential units on the site from 6 that currently exists between the 2 structures to 2 in the newly renovated mixed-use building. Now, the site's governed by the Main Street redevelopment plan and is located in the plan's community shopping zone. And I know we're short on time, but I think since this application does address a lot of the purposes of the zone, just want to go through a couple of them. The Main Street redevelopment plan has some goals that are relevant, and that includes encouraging uses along Main Street that attract pedestrian activity and improving the aesthetic appearances of properties, and this application achieves both of those goals. The vision for the community shopping zone, which is the subsection of the Main Street redevelopment plan that we're in, is to create a vibrant commercial district that caters primarily to local residents of all races and income levels, but that also draws visitors. New buildings in this section are constructed up to the sidewalk line and have attractive, lively facades. And most importantly for this application, surface parking lots that once lined the street have been redeveloped so that buildings line the street. So the vision for the community shopping zone is not to add more surface parking lots, but to eliminate those that currently exist. Specific goals for this part of the zone include reinforcing this section of the redevelopment area as a commercial district that caters primarily to the needs of local residents, encourage property owners to improve their facades, and surface parking redevelopment, encouraging property owners to redevelop surface parking lots with multi-story buildings containing ground floor retail space. The redevelopment plan has specific comments on parking lots, including that the provision of adequate, easily accessible parking is vital for the health of any commercial district. However, excessive parking, particularly in the form of surface parking lots, uses up property that could otherwise be built on, adds impervious coverage, and detracts from the pedestrian-friendly urban character of cities. Furthermore, off-street parking requirements can sometimes deter the redevelopment and rehabilitation of properties, and I think that gets to the core of the primary variance that the applicant is requesting tonight. This plan presents a general parking strategy for Main Street redevelopment area that aims to maximize the use and efficiency of on-street parking and balance additional parking needs with the potential drawbacks of excessive off-street parking requirements. There are several actions that the master plan, the redevelopment plan advances for addressing parking needs, and that is encouraging the more efficient turnover of parking spaces, considering the creation of formal on-street parking or public parking areas, limit direct driveway access to Main Street so that curb space can be made available for on-street parking, and within the community shopping zone, metering on-street parking to help alleviate parking problems. Off-street parking arrangements are recognized as a way of helping address parking needs, but what the plan specifically talks about for a building like this, which is an existing structure that's being redeveloped, is the developments that involve the reuse of existing buildings that lack parking will also have to use off-premises parking resources, which is what the applicant is proposing to address some of its parking demand through the off-street parking arrangement via valet service to the Habitat for Humanity site. So the variances that we're looking at tonight from the redevelopment plan are to be treated as C variances. The municipal land use law provides two tests for the C variances within it. The first is the C1 hardship standard, and the second is the C2 standard, and that is justifiable when the variances that are being requested advance the purposes of the municipal land use law, and the benefits of the variance substantially outweigh the detriments. It's my opinion that some of the variances here are C1 hardship variances, and some of these are C2 flexible C variances. Looking first at the variances that can be granted under the C1 hardship standard. First, we have a rear yard setback that is an existing non-conforming condition, and the applicant's proposing to extend that slightly through the addition that's proposed to the building, but it makes sense to line up the addition with the existing rear setback of the structure. The facade transparency relief that we need is also due to the existing facade of the building, which will remain. The first floor facade of the proposed addition includes a substantial window to offset the existing facade, which doesn't have a lot of windows in it, and it improves the percentage of window transparency throughout the whole building on both the first floor and the building in its entirety, but it cannot correct fully for the existing conditions to deliver a conforming condition. Parking is the biggest variance we're looking at. There's a significant degree of hardship in this case that's associated with the parking requirement. The existing site is fully developed and has no off-street parking or curb cuts to provide parking for this property. Furthermore, it would not be possible for a lot of this side of 6,100 square feet to provide conforming parking for the restaurant use that's proposed. The applicant calculates it at 3,580 square foot of restaurant. I saw your planner's calculation was 3,815 square foot of restaurant. So we need between 54 and 58 parking spaces. Using your planner's calculation of 58 parking spaces, a 9-foot by 18-foot parking space without driveways, just by itself, is 162 square feet of asphalt. If you have 58 of those, that is 9,393 square feet of parking space alone, no driveways, and that is 3,296 square feet larger than the site itself. It is more than double the size of the restaurant. Clearly, the subject site cannot and will not be redeveloped with a conforming commercial use of the sort that your redevelopment plan is looking to encourage along Main Street without parking relief. The only way that you can have a commercial use, such as a restaurant on this site, would be to have most of the building removed and have 2/3 of the site be devoted to parking, surface parking, which the redevelopment plan specifically does not want along Main Street.
Ms. So this, sorry to interrupt you. Does this use also, is this use supported by things such as ride sharing, walkers, bicycles?
Yes.
Things of that sort?
Yes, in terms of mitigating the magnitude of the parking. We have a property that they're going to have bike racks so people can bike to it. It's within a walkable area, and there's on-street parking surrounding it, as well as the valet parking that's proposed. There are other variances that can be granted under the C2 standard, and these variances advance the purposes of the municipal land use law with regard to Purpose A, encouraging municipal action to guide the appropriate use or development of all lands in the state in a manner which will promote public health, safety, morals, and general welfare. The variances advance this purpose by allowing for an appropriate redevelopment of the site in a manner which advances the goals and visions of the redevelopment plan, and in so doing helps revitalize this neighborhood and will promote the general welfare. Purpose C is to provide adequate light, air, and open space. The variances advance this purpose by supporting the redevelopment of the site in a manner which allows for a reduction in lot coverage to a permitted level, thus increasing open space on the lot, as well as the elimination of a 3-story structure which impacts the light, air, and open space of the residences that abut the site. Purpose E, to promote the establishment of appropriate population densities and concentrations in a manner which will contribute to the well-being of persons, neighborhoods, communities, and regions, and preservations of the environment. The plan advances this by the elimination of the non-conforming multifamily residential structure. And Purpose G, which is to provide sufficient space in an appropriate location for a variety of uses, including residential and commercial uses. And this application advances this by allowing for the appropriate redevelopment of the site with a permitted restaurant use, as well as the elimination of a non-conforming use. And Purpose I, to promote a desirable visual environment through creative development techniques and good civic design and arrangement. And the application advances this purpose by providing for an aesthetically pleasing redevelopment of this property, which will be to the benefit of the Main Street community. The benefits of the variances, it's my opinion, they outweigh the detriments. The benefits of the variances that are being requested to support the redevelopment of this site include the appropriate, viable, and attractive redevelopment of the site in a manner which advances the purposes of both the municipal land use law and the Main Street redevelopment plan. The elimination of a non-conforming use in the redevelopment area is another benefit, and the reduction in impervious coverage is a third benefit. There is no detriment, in my opinion, that would result from requested variances. The variance that could have the biggest detriment would be the number of parking spaces, and the applicant has arranged for off-site, off-premises parking that will accommodate 25 vehicles. There's the ability for the site to accommodate pedestrian traffic as well as bike traffic, and there's on-street parking available. In addition, it can be expected that both customers and staff will walk to the site. The variance for signage in this case makes sense in the context of the development and are in line with the intent of the redevelopment plan. The structure is proposed to have 3 different entrances on the ground floor, which are broken up into 3 separate ground floor faces for the building. The northernmost entrance is the restaurant's main entrance, and this entrance is identified by the projecting sign above with the neon, as well as a wall sign, which is a menu board that's mounted above, next to the door. The door to the south of the restaurant entrance serves as the residential use. This door has no signage beyond the numbers for the residential addresses, but it breaks up the first floor facade between the 2 faces of the commercial use. South of the residential use is the wine bar aspect of the restaurant use, and it has a separate entrance. Now, the Main Street face of this part of the use is characterized by a large, visually open window with a proposed identification wall sign above the window, and has a door on the southern side of the building. The intent of the redevelopment plan's signage requirements is to permit a wall sign for every business address. Wall signs consisting of a single panel or individual letter forms mounted on a supporting framework. 1 wall sign is permitted for each ground floor business address, and corner properties are permitted 1 sign for each building facing a public street. Therefore, the 2 wall signs that are proposed, each of which serves a different part of the restaurant use and identifies a different entrance, meets the intent of the plan in providing for a single wall sign per business identity. The applicant also needs relief for having a wall sign and a projecting neon sign serving the same business. The combination of signs is needed to properly identify the restaurant use and its services. The projecting neon sign serves as the primary identification of the business to both vehicle traffic on Main Street and pedestrians seeking the site from along Main Street a little further from the site. The wall sign mounted next to the door, which is the menu board, is at eye level, not a typical large wall sign. It's not going to be highly visible to vehicle traffic or pedestrians that are not standing directly in front of that door, and it allows pedestrians to have a look at the menu even when the business is closed, and it serves to help attract customers from existing pedestrian traffic in the neighborhood, helping both the viability of the restaurant and encouraging the drawing of local residents within a walking distance to the use. And it also clarifies for pedestrian traffic that this is the door to enter in to be seated at the restaurant. The side yard setback relief for the building would cause no detriment. The adjacent neighbor most impacted by the proposed setback has a driveway on the other side of the property line, so the impact is to a driveway. At ground level, the side facade of the building is 7 feet from the lot line. So the relief that's needed is measured from the trash enclosure, the stairs to the second floor deck, and the bump out for the glass enclosed bar on the second floor. And the impact, in my opinion, is minimal. The stairs and the second floor deck are open in area, having little impact on the light air and open space of the adjacent driveway. The second floor bar is enclosed in glass and will not have the same impact on light air and open space as a solid wall would have. The side yard setback relief for the accessory structures, the planters in the side yard, is for the planters only and relates to landscaping and will cause no detriment. Though the planters may technically meet the ordinance definition of an accessory structure, they'll function more as a fence and provide screening for the outdoor dining area. The height of the planters is lower than the fence that's adjacent to them, and rather than having a detriment, these planters would provide a benefit in terms of screening and buffering the adjacent residences from the outdoor seating area. The facade transparency is an improvement over the existing conditions. I can't identify any detriment that would result to the neighbors or the surrounding area from the requested variances. In this case, the benefits of supporting the redevelopment of the site outweigh the detriments. And the last test for a variance is whether or not it supports your master plan and zoning ordinance. And I think I've already read through that quite a bit, and it very much does support the redevelopment plan.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
Can you say that again?
Yes.
Slower this down.
Here's a copy of the testimony.
Any questions from the board? Any questions from our professionals? Any questions from the public? Okay. Are we going to go through this, or the planners? Are you all right with what's in here, or do we still have some outstanding items? Well, I know a lot of it was covered.
I think they addressed.
I mean, I think we addressed everything.
Our concern primarily is that the plans actually represent what's going to be needed to affect the development. We're in support of the development.
Right, we could put that as a condition.
Right, of course, permits can't be issued until the plans are satisfactory to the city.
Okay, I get a motion to open public comment for this application?
Move it.
Second.
And a motion to close public comment?
Move it.
Second.
Okay. We have a suggested motion to move this application forward.
Are there any conditions that we've identified?
Sure. NJTOT approval, as per the items set forth in Jason's report, which I will reference in the conditions. Balance of the items in Jason's report that are going to be, they're all going to be complied with. Parking agreement with Habitat for Humanity will be incorporated as a condition. The bicycle racks will be redesigned to be parallel with building facade and as many as practical to fit in there. Okay.
Sure.
There's something on refuse screening and removal, which I don't have, the particulars, which I will get. Any encroachments into city right-of-way must receive the approval of the mayor and council. And the wood facade and screening and exterior to be blank certified.
Does certified
wood.
Certified wood. Okay, okay, certified wood.
Jack?
Yes.
The bike rack condition is it should be perpendicular to the building, not parallel.
No, parallel.
Parallel to the facade. If you make it perpendicular,
It probably
you'll
won't
cover up the
fit.
side.
The bike would be parallel, the bike
Yeah.
rack would be perpendicular.
No, the bikes will be
Oh, I see, there's on the side.
along the
I got you.
building.
Okay, or were those the ones that you had there, Jack?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
What,
Go ahead.
what about the drainage
Yeah, we need
issue?
the runoff.
The runoff.
Regarding the connection?
Should we say like?
That was part of the engineering
Yeah,
comments, I
usually
thought.
that's-
engineering.
I'll let Jason speak to it, but typically he and I make sure that I reference his report, and usually in his report, like outside agency approvals and all that, by saying that the applicant complies with the items in Jason's report from March 20th or whatever it is, 18th. That typically covers us. And Jason, I always leave those items open. Jason gives me some feedback, or Doug, and then I clean it up if necessary.
All right, so then all the plans are going to reflect what we discussed?
They have to, yeah.
I have to, I know that there was an issue with the foyer garbage. We couldn't see where that was going to be, so I'm assuming that's going to be in the plan also. We didn't receive any kind of a lighting plan. I just want to make sure that nothing, that those front sconces are not glaring.
The applicant will definitely ensure that they
So we have to
comply
make
with.
sure that the lights are
Shielded. I would.
The lighting has to be shielded.
Condition
so
that it's shielded to face downward.
to face downward. So that may not be what that is. It doesn't look like
Would
that.
also be appropriate to say that the lighting in the rear would not spill onto the contiguous.
Exactly.
That's the applicant's goal for sure.
And
We don't want to
also-
have a bad relationship with the neighbors.
And the noise, all the noise ordinances have to be taken into account. Do we have to put in the fact about the screening that you made mention to the neighbor? Do we have to put that in as a condition?
I think it was going to be done on the plans.
It's already on the plan?
so that-
Okay, so that has it. The neighbor,
It was covered, but I don't know, that attention to the trees, I know I keep saying
Yes.
it, but it's because also the urban heat island effect and those, that area, I mean, just in terms of the summer, those trees are really important, so whatever we can say to make sure that the compaction and everything, because it's a really tough site for keeping trees alive.
Right, for sure.
what about the impervious surface? There was like a question about 93% versus.
I think our engineer testified that
We're
it's
gonna go
under
down to-
90%.
Okay, so you're gonna go down.
according to his calculations. Yeah.
So that would make it comply with the ordinance.
Yes,
So
it's
they wouldn't need-
90% is permitted. I believe we're at 89.8.
He's supposed to
Give
provide
it
the
to you,
breakdown.
and
Yep.
then, okay, and when you get my copy, you'll let me know.
Okay. Got that. I don't know if anybody else had anything else that they needed added here?
No.
How long, all right, and so you gave us the contract that you have with Habitat.
Yes.
And the valet parking, are any parking spaces gonna go away because you have a valet?
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
Meaning that the process of
street.
getting.
Well, the difficulty at the moment is that we don't have the striping, and I assume it's going to be striped, so we're not totally clear what. I assume we would be using probably one parking space for the valet purposes.
So we have to figure out what do we have to put in here for that? That one, does it have to be mentioned? Does it have to be, because nowhere in here did it say that we're gonna be taking away a parking space.
So does it have to be designated as a valet spot so people?
No, it doesn't.
Because
I
they'll
don't-
still be using it during the day.
Right, it'll be used during the day, so it won't be used at night. I mean, at night it'll be used as valet.
Right. I think that's just part of the testimony that one space will be eliminated
Because of that.
during evening operation for valet
For
uses.
valet use?
Right now, there is no city ordinance regulating valet.
Okay, that's what I was gonna ask, if there's something I should put in the drawings.
Doesn't mean it's not coming, but right now there isn't one.
Right, and obviously that should be to the northmost space there, because that's next to the driveway of the next,
Right.
you know, the
Country
next
Park.
business, so that would would make sense.
Right.
Okay. Anything else that anybody else, that we missed? No? All right.
Move to approve all the conditions.
Okay, preliminary, final, and variances.
Yes.
Okay,
All of that.
and
All
that
that.
would be Rick Emmer.
Second.
Councilwoman Yvonne Clayton,
Yes.
Mayor John Moore,
Yes.
Tim Henry,
Yes.
Michael Manzello.
Yes.
Jennifer Sauter.
Yes.
Richard Syfax.
Yes.
Alexis Taylor.
Yes.
Rick Langford.
Yes.
Barbara Prizek.
Yes.
Application
Can I just thank you for everything that you've done to make sure that you've made it as green as you could.
We tried.
And taking care of the parking ahead of time. As you can see what happened prior to you.
Thank you
Thank you
for
very much.
hearing us for the rest of the evening. We do appreciate you staying past the curfew. Thank you.
Sorry? There's only, before we go, I know, everybody wants to leave, I know. There's just one thing I'd like to bring up. Hi. Just one moment. There's only one more moment, okay? There's only one other thing I'd like to bring up to alert all the board members that our next meeting, April 8th, we have the complete street bike plan. Please be prepared. It's the only application we're going to be hearing, so read it. Buckle up, because it might be a long night. Okay? All right. Thank you so much. Move to adjourn.
Second.
John.
Aye.
Aye.